Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Sheila Vaughn Wees. Sheila Vaughn Wees was born into a loving and respectful family. However, as she grew older, she struggled to instill these values in her daughter, who became stubborn and disobedient, eventually leading to tragedy. On June 10, 1952, Neil Wees and Liz Lenore Allen welcomed their daughter, Sheila. Neil was a World War I veteran who had served in the United States Air Force, and Liz worked as an accountant. The couple had 3 children, Sheila, Bill, and Deborah, and they lived in Minneapolis. Sheila did very well in school and was an excellent student. She then went to Boston University, graduating with a master's degree in political science. After graduation, she worked at a publishing house, where she interacted with several famous people. One day, Sheila met James Mack, a well-known conductor, composer, producer, and arranger in the music industry. At that time, James had children from a previous marriage. But this did not stop him from starting a romantic relationship with Sheila. Their relationship quickly advanced, and they soon got married. After the wedding, the couple moved to a small town in the district of Foran. There, they got involved in community activities and even organized performances in their backyard. In October 1995, her daughter Lois Heather Mack was born. At 43, Sheila was overjoyed to welcome a healthy baby girl. She and her husband, James, showered Lois with love and enrolled her in a top preschool and school. However, some relatives felt that Sheila spoiled her daughter. In 2001, Sheila and James planned a vacation and bought tickets for a Mediterranean cruise, they taking Lois along. Sadly, during the trip, James suffered a serious leg injury that was not properly treated, resulting in partial paralysis. The family later filed a lawsuit against the cruise company for damages, but the legal process took more than 9 years to resolve. On July 20, 2006, the family went on a trip to Athens, where James later died in their hotel room. His death was recorded on August 6, 2006. After his death, James Maxwell was revealed, stating that his daughter Lois, Heather, would inherit $1.5 million. The relationship between Sheila and Lois was strained. Lois often displayed disruptive behavior, throwing tantrums, and even attacking her mother. Since 2008, police reports have documented 35 incidents of domestic violence in Sheila's household. Additionally, Lois often ran away from home, prompting Sheila to file a missing persons report. Friends of Sheila's have reported that she sought help from various psychologists to deal with the situation. During this challenging period, Lois was a middle school student at Oak Park and River Forest School, where her talent for dancing started to show. She generally behaved well in school, but discussions about her relationship with her mother would often lead to her becoming upset. At that time, she was dating a boy named Tommy Schaefer, who was 2 years older than her. Tommy had a history of legal issues due to minor offenses. Tommy had many friends. He was especially close to his cousin Robert Bibbs. In 2011, Sheila's family's lawsuit after James injured his leg on a cruise was settled, resulting in a court judgment awarding her family $340,000 in damages. Since James had died, the money was supposed to go to Lois as stated in his will. However, for reasons that are unclear, the judge ordered the money to be sent to Sheila, which increased the conflict between Lois and Sheila. Her resentment towards her mother grew, and she made numerous threats against Sheila. By 2013, Sheila, concerned for her safety, hired a private investigator because Lois had begun to stalk her, closely monitoring her routes, schedules, and daily routines. There was animosity between them, which made their trip to the Greek coast seem unusual. However, nothing catastrophic happened during that time. In 2014, Tommy and Lois began seeing each other more frequently. Despite Sheila's objections, The situation escalated when Lois stole Sheila's bank card at a hotel party and spent over $1,000. Her mother threatened to report Lois to the police, blaming her for many problems, including the death of her father James. Tensions rose, leading Lois and Tommy to consider a drastic solution to their problems, as Sheila was seen as an obstacle to accessing the family's finances. Despite their strained relationship, Sheila and Lois traveled to Bali together in August 2014. The mother hopes that during her 10 days here, her daughter will reconsider her feelings and stop resenting her. They stayed at the St. Regis Hotel in Bali. On the day they arrived in Bali, Lois texted Tommy, confirming that everything was going according to plan. She then stole her mother's credit card again and bought a $12,000 ticket for Tommy. He arrived on the island just 12 hours later. Meanwhile, Lois was arguing with her mother at the hotel, this time about the news of her pregnancy. Tommy then went to the hotel where Sheila and Lois were staying and got involved in the fight. He hit Sheila in the face with a metal crowbar, killing her instantly. Tommy told his cousin Robert what had happened. Lois and Tommy then put Sheila's body in a suitcase and asked a porter to leave it in the hotel lobby while they called a taxi. The taxi arrived within 10 minutes and they quickly loaded the suitcase containing Sheila's body into the trunk to leave Bali as soon as possible. However, Sheila had previously warned the hotel staff not to accept any payments made with her card without her presence, knowing that Lois often stole her cards. As a result, Lois had no money and the couple were unable to pay for their hotel room. They fled without paying the bill, leaving their passports in the hotel safe. Without these documents, they cannot go to the airport. Lois and Tommy asked the taxi driver to stop at a budget hotel called Rita Valley, which they had just passed. They left their suitcases in the taxi and asked the driver to wait 10 to 15 minutes while they checked in. However, 2 hours had passed, and the driver became impatient and went into the hotel himself, but found their room empty. Lois and Tommy had checked in there but had quickly fled. Frustrated, the taxi driver returned to his car and noticed that the suitcase was leaking a red liquid. Suspecting foul play, he called the police. When the police arrived and opened the suitcase, they discovered Sheila's body inside. Forensic experts later concluded that she had died from facial fractures that had blocked her airway. In addition, her fingers were broken and her body was covered in bruises. The heartbreaking news of Sheila's death reached her family, prompting her sister, Deborah, to begin searching online for information about the case. All she found was a photograph of a suitcase. As details of the murder were reported in the media, public interest grew. Staff at the Rita Suitcase Hotel informed police that a young couple had checked in that night without luggage. When hotel staff asked them to provide their full names for internet use, they complied, knowing that this was required. The police were quick to obtain the couple's information. Police began to go to the room the couple was staying in. Hotel staff said the room had been searched and was empty. However, the couple had secretly returned to the room because they had nowhere else to go and were exhausted. They were sleeping when police found them. Lois and Tommy were taken to the police station for questioning. They gave conflicting stories about being attacked by a gang at the St. Regis Hotel and claimed that the robbers had killed Sheila. While the couple's testimony was inconsistent, the hotel staff and taxi driver remained consistent in their tests. As a result, Lois and Tommy were arrested for murder. Lois became angry, shouting that she was innocent and demanding a lawyer from the United States. The couple appeared on public television in Indonesia, with the report filmed from the police station. Tommy covered his face with a t-shirt, while Lois smiled and smoked a cigarette. They were then transferred to Lesenpar Prison, which houses serious criminals and murderers. Sheila's body was returned home for burial. Her case attracted international attention. During the proceedings, Lois underwent several psychological evaluations, but the results were not considered in the verdict. As the investigation progressed, police discovered more details about the case and the media reported that Lois was pregnant. Then on March 17, 2015, a baby girl named Stella was born. The police allowed Lois to see her baby, but only within the confines of the prison. The baby was healthy, but had an extra finger on his left hand that required surgery to remove. At the hearing, Tommy cried as he claimed that he was defending himself against an aggressive Sheila. He said that she attacked him when she found out about Lois's pregnancy. He also said that Lois often expressed a desire to escape her difficult mother. Lois' testimony contradicted Tommy's. She said she never wanted her mother to die. During the violent fight, she even ran into the bathroom to save her mother. But her testimony was not believed. The judge was presented with evidence that showed Lois and Tommy's criminal intent. Lois had previously suggested that Tommy hire a hitman to kill Sheila and had prepared $40,000 for the purpose. Sheila's autopsy showed obvious injuries and bruises on her hands and face, indicating that Sheila had fought back in self-defense. As a result, Lois Heather Mack and Tommy Schaefer were convicted of premeditated murder. Under Indonesian law, they faced the death penalty. However, the court pardoned them. This leniency was largely due to their newborn child and the couple's deep remorse. Tommy realized the severity of his actions. Sheila's family later visited him in prison, talked to him, and expressed their grief. This interaction caused Tommy to fall into a depression. He began to hate himself and truly regret his choices. His mental state deteriorated, leading to health problems, causing him to lose 11 kilograms and look pale. In April 2015, the final court hearing concluded, and the judge announced the verdict. Lois Heather Mack was sentenced to 10 years in prison, while Tommy Schaefer received an 18-year term. The prosecution described them as ruthless criminals. However, Tommy's good behavior and expressed remorse helped him avoid a longer sentence. As they left the courtroom, Lois posed for photographers from various newspapers and, while drinking a soda that smelled of alcohol, smiled and made jokes. The only thing that troubled her was the fact that she would be released much earlier than Tommy. Meanwhile, Tommy looked at her with anger and wanted nothing to do with her, marking the end of their relationship. Lois, who avoided the death penalty and received a shorter sentence, acted provocatively in prison. She frequently took photos and videos with her friends in prison, enjoying their time together. She managed to get alcohol to drink. To earn money to buy alcohol, she sold food in the prison yard. The prison authorities allowed her to sell food, feeling sorry for her because she was a single mother, but they saw that she did not care much for her daughter, who spent her early years in terrible conditions. Tommy considered Lois a fallen person and mentally ill. One day, reporters secretly entered the prison and recorded footage of Lois having fun and dancing with friends in her cell. The footage quickly went viral on television and online, causing considerable public outrage. In response, Tommy filed a petition with the United States government, requesting that Lois be transferred from the Indonesian prison to a psychiatric hospital in the United States. In the petition, he expressed that he was not seeking sympathy but hoped that their daughter would grow up to be a good person. A year later, Tommy wrote a letter to his friends detailing how Sheila's murder was planned and carried out, and Lois's questionable actions in front of their young daughter Stella. Lois seemed to be focused only on her own gain, with no regard for Stella. The responsibility of looking after Lois' daughter Stella was eventually given to a fellow prisoner, Ashar Puta Melody Sert, who had been released. Ashar quickly adapted to life in Indonesia and married a wealthy local man. Stella was then placed in the care of the couple. The police identified Robert's involvement in Sheila's murder, leading to his quick arrest and trial in 2017. He pleaded guilty to breaking the law and being an accessory to Sheila's murder. During the trial, he revealed that in August 2014, Tommy had come to him for advice on how to carry out a murder. As a result, Robert received a 9-year prison sentence. Sheila's family was pleased with the outcome. While in prison, Lois ended her relationship with Tommy. In October 2021, Lois completed 7 years in an Indonesian prison and was paroled. Her reunion with her 6-year-old daughter, Stella, was a moment of liberation for her. Stella lived in Indonesia for another month before being extradited to the United States with her mother. At that point, her daughter no longer needed a guardian. Upon arriving in Chicago, Lois was arrested at the airport by FBI agents. She faced new charges of conspiracy to murder a U.S. citizen abroad and obstruction of justice. Lois attempted to draw media attention to her arrest, believing it was unfair, especially since she had already served time in Indonesia. She felt it was unfair that the police had brought new charges against her. At her first court appearance in the United States, Lois denied all charges against her. Her attorney, Keith Vogel-Barova, argued for her to be released on bail. In response, District Judge Charnell agreed to consider the appeal and heard from Assistant District Attorney Terry Keeney. The court needed a reasonable amount of time to make a decision. A week later, Lois reached a plea deal with police and pleaded guilty to conspiracy to murder a U.S. citizen abroad. A hearing then took place in Illinois federal court. District Judge Matthew Kelly considered the prosecution's recommendation for a 28-year prison sentence, minus 7 years for time served in Indonesia. The judge then sentenced Lois Heather Mack to 26 years in prison, ordered her to pay $2,278 in restitution, and fined her $50,000. Hello again, true crime fans, we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Lucy Landry. Lucy Landry was born in 1971 in Ronda, England, to Roger and Andrea Landry. She has a younger sister named Anna. Lucy had a happy childhood. Because she and her sister had similar interests, they were always very close. During primary school, Lucy's outgoing and friendly personality made her a favorite of her teachers and classmates. She was a beautiful girl, and at school she became one of the most popular girls. Lucy and Anna shared a love of ponies, and their father surprised them by enrolling them in the local equestrian club. This taught them discipline and showed off their talents. They later represented the club in many events and competitions. By the time Lucy started secondary school, she had become an excellent equestrian. However, her passion was not limited to the track. She also began studying the flute and piano, spending many hours practicing to master both instruments. Her hard work soon paid off. And within a year she had a comprehensive understanding of classical music, and she was accepted into the youth orchestra and joined the school choir. As often happens in adolescence, a healthy romantic interest entered her life, and Lucy became very close to Gareth Jenkins. However, she kept her feelings a secret. After completing her secondary education in 1989, Lucy decided to pursue a career in music. To this end, she enrolled in a BA degree at the University of Warwick. Her goal was to become a music teacher and dedicate herself to music education. However, things did not go as planned. Although she was passionate about music, she did not like the direction of the degree program. She therefore decided to change her plans and study urban planning. During this time, Lucy met G.R.A. McAllister, and they soon discovered that their outlook on life was very similar. They shared a love for art and common interests. Their relationship progressed and they began to plan for the future. Lucy decided to introduce him to her parents. Roger and Andrea were delighted with the meeting, as they believed he was the ideal partner for their daughter. Her parents were so delighted that they decided to buy Lucy a house in Coventry, a city in northwest London. After moving to a new home, Lucy invited G.R.A. to live with her and they continued to go to school. In 1995, they had their first child, named James. Lucy decided to drop out of college to focus on raising the child. Meanwhile, GRA continued her college studies and took a night shift job at the post office to cover her living expenses. For many months, she had to stay home alone to take care of the child and had to be away from GRA for many hours. She began to feel bored. Then, she found no better solution than exploring chat rooms on the internet to distract herself, looking for ways to meet new people. One night, while Lucy was participating in online conversations in many chat rooms, she met Harold Landry. Harold, a 53-year-old American from Louisiana, was born into a very poor family. And he knew that hard work was the only way to escape poverty. His opportunity came when he realized that in the oil industry, the key was not to own an oil well but to provide essential infrastructure for the owners of such. He founded his own company, specializing in providing infrastructure for oil field owners. Harold amassed a huge fortune by designing and manufacturing hydraulic equipment for major oil companies in the southern United States, eventually becoming a billionaire. In his personal life, Harold was married and divorced twice, and his children from previous relationships were not made public. A significant event took place in 1992 when Harold was still single. He met a married woman 20 years his junior. Harold pursued and courted her, and she eventually succumbed to his advances. On February 6, 1994, Harold took her out to New Orleans, hiring a babysitter to look after her children. After the evening ended, Harold accompanied his mistress to her home and offered to take the babysitter to her home. Outside the residence, Chris, the betrayed husband, secretly watched his wife's actions. After dropping his mistress off at home, Harold, saying goodbye, left. The girl's husband Chris followed Harold's car, which Harold noticed was tailing him. Acting on instinct, Harold opened the glove compartment and pulled out a gun that he had kept inside. When both cars stopped at a red light, the situation became tense. According to the babysitter, Harold pointed the pistol at Chris and fired. The bullet severed an artery in Chris's neck and damaged a nerve that connected to his vocal cords. Chris collapsed on the sidewalk with a wound to his neck. Fortunately, there was a hospital right in front of them, allowing him to receive immediate first aid, and doctors saved his life. Harold was arrested and charged with attempted murder. His trial took place in 1997. In his opening statement, the defense attorney told the jury that Chris was the victim of a tragic and terrible incident. As for his client, he said he had acted out of fear and self-defense. The defense's clever strategy led the jury, consisting of 4 men and 8 women, to find Harold guilty of the lesser charge of aggravated assault. As a result, he was sentenced to 5 years in prison. After an appeal, Harold was given probation. In exchange, he had to pay a $500 fine and perform community service. Although he wanted to be completely exonerated, he thanked his attorney, Pat, for her hard work. They have since become good friends. Soon after, Harold and Chris agreed to an undisclosed settlement amount. By the time Harold began chatting with Lucy, he was already living in Covington and still wealthy enough to not have to work. He was also honest about his profession and everything about his past life, including his love life and run-ins with the law. Surprisingly, these revelations only made Lucy more attracted to him. As they continued to chat online, Harold painted a picture of a lavish lifestyle that Lucy found hard to resist. His determination and charm eventually paid off when Lucy ended her relationship with GRA. In the early 2000s, Harold traveled to England to meet Lucy, and she took the opportunity to introduce him to her parents as her boyfriend. Although they were surprised by the significant age gap between the two, they respected their daughter's choice and did not express any objection to the relationship. Harold felt grateful and pleased to be sharing his life with Lucy, and he did everything he could to surprise her with lavish gifts and anything else she wanted. By this point, He had fallen in love with her and was thinking about proposing to her. However, he wanted the proposal to be special and was waiting for the perfect time and setting. To achieve his goal, Harold organized a trip to his favorite destination, Mexico, with Lucy, her son, James, and Gra. The location was also convenient because his friend Pat, who used to be his lawyer, had an apartment nearby. Before the trip, Harold bought a diamond ring and excitedly shared his plans with Pat. However, Pat expressed some misgivings about Lucy. During their time in Mexico, Pat noticed that Lucy spent a lot of time with Gra, which he found unusual. He seemed completely oblivious to this and eventually went ahead with the proposal. Lucy happily accepted the proposal and in mid-2003. Soon after, Harold surprised her by buying a multi-million-dollar property in a posh Worcestershire neighborhood. Their marriage was peaceful. They had wonderful neighbors such as Rachel Clark and Stephen Kennedy, who later became lovely friends. Soon after, the newlyweds had their first daughter, whom they named Harriet. Lucy and Harold were both delighted to welcome their little girl, and from then on, he devoted his heart and soul to her. Equally important and affectionate was the relationship he maintained with James, whom he treated as his own son. But over time, their initial happiness began to fade. Harold began to make more demands on Lucy, which made her increasingly annoyed. He expected her to always conform to his preferences and do what he asked, taking on a submissive role. Lucy, however, had different expectations, and this caused tension in their relationship. Eventually, Lucy became outspoken and unafraid to express her thoughts, and in this move, her husband was unwilling to give in. James witnessed the breakdown of his mother and stepfather's relationship. The neighbors were disturbed by the constant arguments that lasted for hours. They also knew that Lucy and Harold had an alcohol problem, which caused their loud arguments and complaints. Whenever the couple had a particularly intense argument, resulting in them not speaking to each other for a while, the neighbors felt a sense of relief and peace. In mid-2009, Lucy used social media to reconnect with Gareth, an old friend from high school whom she had not spoken to in years. Lucy's husband, Harold, would often go to bed while Lucy stayed up to chat online. Harold began to realize that Lucy was using social media to find someone new, just as she had found him before. But instead of confronting her, he decided to give her some space, and he traveled to Mexico and stayed there for a while. Meanwhile, Lucy invites Gareth to live with her. In the fall of 2009, her husband Harold returns to England in the hope of mending their marriage. However, as soon as he moves in, Lucy asks for a divorce. Initially, he is devastated. Then, after a few weeks, Harold begins a relationship. He meets this new woman online. She lives nearby and goes by the name Rachel. As Lucy and Harold pursue their new relationship, their divorce negotiations begin, but new conflicts arise. One major point of disagreement is the house. Lucy wants to keep it to ensure stability for their children, while Harold is determined to sell it. He gives Lucy money to buy a smaller apartment and removes her from his will. When Lucy discovers this, her hatred for him drives her to share everything about Harold's past with their son James, leaving nothing out. Amid the tension, Gareth invited Lucy to come to Wales with him for a few days. After returning home, Lucy no longer tried to hide her phone conversations from her new love. Meanwhile, Lucy and Harold were both drinking heavily, and the arguments escalated, leaving the children exposed to a violent and unbearable atmosphere. On Monday, February 1, 2010, Harold had been drinking all day. When a package arrived for Stephen, Harold mistakenly received it. That evening, around 9 p.m., Stephen returned home from work to find a notification that his package had been delivered to the Landry's home. Seeing the lights on, Stephen went to their house to collect the package. Harold invited him in and offered him a drink. After a brief conversation with Lucy, Stephen realized that Harold was drunk. He took his package, apologized, and left. The couple then argued about buying furniture for their upcoming move. The disagreement was trivial, but it escalated into a fight. During the argument, Harold hit Lucy across the cheek with a kitchen utensil. James, who had learned to deal with their arguments over the years, intervened and saw that his mother was injured. He quickly called the police and made it his priority to get his sister to safety. Lucy and the children fled the house to seek help after the incident. Lucy ran to Stephen's house. However, Harold caught up with her and stabbed her several times with a knife before leaving her under a bush in the garden. Alerted by Lucy's screams, Stephen ran outside and found her after only a few steps. Initially, he thought she had passed out, but he soon realized the severity of her injuries. After receiving an emergency call, the police arrived at the scene. They called an ambulance and searched the surrounding area for the culprit. However, they only found the children hiding terrified in the backyard in the dark. An ambulance then took Lucy to the hospital. Unfortunately, her heart had stopped. Harold went to his new girlfriend Rachel's house, revealing that something terrible had happened, but he did not explain further. He gave her $40,000 in bank money, some cash, his car keys, and some blank checks with his signature on them. He then returned home. Several police patrols searched for him, and he was eventually found walking along the road and arrested. Her parents Roger and Andrea were devastated after hearing the news. In a statement released by the police, her parents asked for respect while they grieved for the loss of their daughter. They declined to speak to the media at this time. Instead, they focused on caring for their grandchildren. A post-mortem examination later confirmed that Lucy died from multiple stab wounds to the chest. On February 5, 2010, Harold was brought to trial and charged with murder, based on evidence and witness testimony from James. The trial began in early February 2011, with Judge David Fawson presiding and Harold's attorney Andy Childs defending. During the trial, Harold's defense team argued that he was driven to action by his wife Lucy's intense anger, which left him feeling provoked and left with no other choice. Harold took the stand, tearfully expressing his love for Lucy and remorse for his actions. He then followed his attorney's strategy, claiming that he was guilty of involuntary manslaughter because Lucy had pushed him to the limit. The prosecution presented a highly detailed animation of the many injuries the victim suffered. This presentation shocked those in the courtroom. On February 24, 2011, the jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before finding Harold Landry guilty of murdering his 38-year-old wife, Lucy Landry. Harold was 64 years old at the time of the murder. The following day, the judge delivered a scathing statement when sentencing Harold. He described the attack as horrific and unforgivable, dismissing Harold's claims that Lucy may have provoked him. The judge viewed these claims as a desperate attempt by Harold to defend himself. As a result, Harold was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 16 years before he could be considered for parole. This meant that he would have to be over 80 before he was eligible for parole. Lucy's family and friends expressed their gratitude not only for the case being resolved, but also for the judge's comments. Hey detectives! Welcome back, we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Isla Reynolds. Isla Reynolds was born on April 4, 2010 in Waterville, Maine, USA. With blonde hair, blue eyes, and a charming smile, she was an adorable child who loved music and dancing. Her parents, Trista Reynolds and Justin DiPietro, had a brief romantic relationship in the summer of 2009, which resulted in Trista becoming pregnant. However, the couple broke up and Justin was initially a bit apprehensive about becoming a father, even doubting whether he was really the biological father of the child. When Trista gave birth to Isla, the child bore a strong resemblance to Justin, but he initially refused to acknowledge Isla as his daughter. However, after a paternity test in July 2010, Justin finally accepted his role as her father. As a result, Child Protective Services ordered Justin to pay child support in December 2010. Although Trista and Justin did not have a formal custody agreement in court, they did have an agreement in which Trista, who resided in Portland, would have primary physical custody. It was not until mid-2011, after Isla's first birthday, that Justin began spending time with his daughter. Since he lived an hour and a half away and visits were scheduled to be during the day and very brief, they agreed that Justin could occasionally take Isla with him but never overnight. Trista gave birth to her first child, Isla. Soon after, she became pregnant with her new boyfriend Raymond's child. In 2011, Trista had her second child, a son named Raymond Jr., and Isla became a big sister. Trista cared for both children until October 13, 2011, when Child Protective Services intervened due to concerns. The details of the complaint that led to the meeting are unclear, but it is known that Trista had a substance abuse problem. That day, officials gave her an ultimatum: overcome her addiction or lose custody of her children. In order to avoid losing custody, Trista entered a 10-day rehabilitation program and left the children in the care of her mother and sister. Isla and Raymond Jr. were her world, and she was determined not to lose them. By October 2011, Justin had seen Isla about 5 to 10 times. However, just 4 days after Trista was taken into custody, on October 17, Justin and his family decided to take custody of Isla. Justin's mother, Phoebe DePetro, contacted Child Protective Services and was approved to take Isla. The agency promptly notified Trista's relatives of the decision. However, Isla's aunt, Jessica, strongly disagreed with Child Protective Services' decision, accusing Justin of abusing Isla in the past and expressing concerns for the child's well-being. The officials argued that a father had more custody rights than an aunt. After being granted permission, Justin and his family went to pick up Isla, but they did not know the exact address. To resolve the issue, Child Protective officials provided the location through Officer Charles Weaver. Officer Charles accompanied Justin and his mother to Jessica's home, where Isla was staying with her aunt. While the grandmother waited in the car, Justin and Officer Charles approached the door. A dramatic scene ensued as Jessica pleaded with the police not to take Isla away, warning that she would not give up the child willingly. Despite the stress, police observed that Isla appeared to be very happy, constantly laughing, playing, and even trying to strike up a conversation. Trista's sister, Jessica, asked the police to observe how Isla's behavior changed when Justin arrived. When Justin approached, Isla immediately began crying and tried to get away from him. Despite her distress, the police handed Isla over to her father. Isla struggled and screamed, even trying to bite the police officer when she was placed in Justin's arms. Jessica explained to Officer Charles that Isla was extremely afraid of her father and that it was not in her best interest to take the child away from her family. Charles explained that if it were up to him, he would not let Isla go with Justin, but that it was not his decision and that he was there to enforce the directive from Child Services. In order to transfer custody, one option is to reach an agreement with the child's mother or seek the judge's approval through a court proceeding. However, in a recent custody exchange, neither of these steps were taken. Instead, the decision was made by the Child Protective Services supervisor. Unfortunately, the supervisor awarded custody to the child's father, Justin. Before the court grants sole custody to a parent, it typically conducts a thorough evaluation, including a background check and home visit. However, this did not occur in Isla's case. The primary consideration in custody decisions is the best interests of the child, but there are no records to support the decision made in Isla's case. Analysts say the only reason to remove a child from her maternal relatives is if the child is in imminent danger. If officials believed Isla was in danger, it is unclear why her younger brother, Raymond Jr., was not removed from the home. The father took her to his family home in Waterville. His 47-year-old mother, Phoebe, his 24-year-old sister, Alicia, and her young daughter, Gabriella, also lived there. Justin, the 25-year-old father, lived in a basement, a large, partially finished room, while the rest of the family lived upstairs. Trista called Justin every day during his rehabilitation to talk to Isla and make sure everything was okay. She did not notice anything unusual in these calls. On October 20, 2011, when Trista was on her 8th day of treatment, a meeting was held to discuss Isla's situation. Attendees included members of Child Protective Services, 2 doctors, Trista, her sister Jessica, an attorney, and Justin, who participated by phone. As a result of the discussion, an agreement was reached that Isla would be returned to Trista on October 22, 2011, after completing her addiction recovery program. It was also decided that Justin would take Isla to a treatment center on October 21 to visit her mother. Although things initially seemed to be going well for Trista, the situation soon took a turn for the worse, with no agreement being made and implemented. Trista desperately sought the help of Child Protective Services to enforce their original agreement, but her repeated calls were unsuccessful. So she proposed a temporary solution to Justin. He would continue to care for their daughter, and she would have regular visitation rights to Isla. However, on November 12, 2011, Justin took their daughter to the emergency room after she was injured. After conducting relevant tests, doctors determined that she had a broken arm. Justin told the doctor that the accident happened the night before, November 11th. It was raining, he said, and he slipped and fell on her while on the porch with Isla in his arms. He added that although the girl was crying, she did not appear to be injured, and it was not until the next morning that it became clear that she needed urgent medical attention. By the following Monday, the orthopedist said that surgery was not necessary and that the injury would heal on its own. A week later, on November 26th, at a third medical appointment to assess the child's progress, the specialist said everything was going according to plan. Trista was present at that medical appointment to closely monitor her daughter's recovery, never thinking that it would be the last time she would hold her. The mother's decision to seek custody of Isla marked a turning point. On December 15, 2011, she filed a petition with the court to begin the custody process due to ongoing disputes over visitation communication with her daughter. Just 2 days later, on December 17, 2011, Justin contacted the police, reporting Isla missing from his mother's home, where he was staying with his girlfriend Courtney Roberts and his sister Alicia. According to Justin, Isla had been put to bed the night before, but when they woke up, the 20-month-old was no longer there. That morning, Trista had gone to visit her husband Raymond at a correctional facility in a coastal Maine town near the Canadian border. Raymond was serving time for arson. Trista was in the passenger seat, asleep, while her father-in-law, Robert Fourier, drove. Robert receives a call from Trista's father with alarming news: Trista's child, Isla, is missing. Robert is momentarily stunned by the news, then finds a safe place to stop the car and wake Trista. Still half asleep, Trista hears her father's voice on the phone and tries to grasp the terrible news of her child's disappearance. Panicked, she immediately instructs Robert to change direction and go meet the police who are looking for Isla. Trista's hour-and-a-half journey feels like a century as she anxiously tries to contact Justin, growing increasingly frightened when he does not answer her calls. Upon arriving at the police station, Trista and her father-in-law, Robert, give their statements. 30 minutes later, Trista's father joins them. Justin called 911 at 8:49 a.m. that morning to report her missing, saying that Isla was last seen the night before at 10 p.m. by Justin's sister, Alicia, who had gone to check on Isla before going to bed. However, by Saturday morning, Isla had disappeared from her crib, with Justin not specifying the exact time she had gone missing in the call. Justin's theory was that Isla had been abducted by a stranger. As news of her disappearance quickly spread, the police quickly launched an investigation. In a statement to the media, the police chief assured that they were working diligently to find Isla at all costs. To aid in the search, the police thoroughly searched the house for any potential clues that could lead them to Isla. On the second day of the search, Sunday, December 18th, trained search dogs were brought in to assist. The area around the house where Isla was last seen was thoroughly searched, and a detailed search was conducted at Trista's home. Due to the search, Trista had to temporarily stay in a motel with her mother and youngest son. By December 19th, the third day after the disappearance, the FBI was brought in to assist in the search. By this time, approximately 75 people from various agencies were involved in the investigation. State police had seized 2 vehicles from Justin's home, a 1996 Ford Explorer owned by Justin and a silver 4-door sedan owned by Justin's girlfriend, Courtney, who had been present the night of the disappearance. The news quickly attracted local media attention, and in the days that followed, Trista appeared in several local media outlets, criticizing Justin and implying that he was responsible for the disappearance. As the news spread nationwide, Trista continued to express her concerns, saying that Justin, as the last person to see her daughter alive, was the only one who could answer her questions. Finally, Justin released a statement to the media on Wednesday, asserting that he knew nothing about Isla's disappearance and assuring the public that he and his family would cooperate fully with the investigation to ensure Isla's safe return. However, in his statement, Justin admitted that Isla was in his sole custody at the time of her disappearance. But he lied, saying this was achieved through an agreement with the mother. Furthermore, he added that Trista was incapable of caring for the child. As time went on, the search effort expanded. The FBI's Child Abduction Rapid Deployment Team, CARD, canvassed the neighborhood, knocking on every door. They contacted every household, returned to the area multiple times, and interviewed neighbors to gather vital information. With a team of 75 dedicated officers, the police demonstrated their unwavering commitment to solving the case. Within 10 days of Justin's initial report, police had spent approximately 5,000 hours searching and were actively pursuing 330 leads. A massive search effort for Isla involved approximately 50 civilian volunteers from a search and rescue association. In addition, a $30,000 reward was offered to anyone who could provide valuable information that could assist in finding Isla. Isla's devoted mother, Trista, played a key role in bringing the case to the forefront. She worked with the support group to organize numerous events, such as vigils and parades, to honor Isla's memory. Her persistence ensured that the case remained in the public eye, with news cameras continuing to cover the story. Trista, along with other spokespeople, provided reporters with updates to keep the story on the front page. Initially, police treating the case as a missing persons investigation rather than a homicide. However, began to change when police sealed off Justin's home and the surrounding area. Police also seized his car and made a major announcement, further altering the public's perception of the case at the direction of the head of the Criminal Prosecution Agency, who made a public announcement. The police officially ruled out the possibility that Isla had run away on her own. On the 13th day of the investigation, the sheriff transferred the case to the state police's Major Crimes Unit. In this announcement, a difficult reality was revealed. The case had been moved from a missing persons investigation to a criminal investigation. In the early days, Justin kept a low profile and avoided the media, but over time, he began to appear more frequently. In one of his interviews on the Today Show, he addressed the change in the law enforcement message, asserting that Isla had been kidnapped and begging the person who kidnapped her to bring her home. He stated that he went on the show to approach whoever kidnapped his daughter and tell them that their actions were wrong. He stressed that they had no right to make such a decision because they were not her father and stressed that Isla needed to stay home with her family. When asked about his previous silence, Justin admitted that he had refrained from speaking out because he initially thought Isla would return. He said that the police had advised him to stay away from the media, a part confirmed by a Department of Public Safety spokesperson. The spokesperson clarified that this advice was only given initially, and that the police had later encouraged Isla's parents to make more public appearances. Justin addressed the allegations against him directly. He invited the TV host to spend a day with him to see firsthand what he was going through. He expressed his appreciation for the police's efforts. Justin stressed that the truth remains the same, no matter how many times someone may be accused or called a liar. He believes that the truth is patient and will eventually come out. In late January, police announced that Isla's blood had been found in several locations in Justin's home. They also indicated that, although there was not enough evidence to make an arrest, Justin, Courtney, and Alicia, the three adults who lived in the home where Isla was last seen, were considered suspects. Stephen McCausland, a spokesman for the Department of Public Safety, stated that the family's account of the events was not supported by any forensic evidence, dismissing the possibility that someone had broken into Isla's bedroom undetected and taken her while the three adults were in the home. 6 months after Isla was reported missing. On May 30, 2012, police stated that there was no possibility that she was still alive. Trista's family allowed reporters into their home for a press conference announcing the news. Upon hearing the news, Trista immediately burst into tears, which quickly turned to anger as she accused Justin of killing her daughter. For Trista's family, learning the details of the forensic tests conducted at Justin's home was extremely difficult. They knew that Isla's blood had been found and that the amount of blood represented 25% of her total blood volume. However, they never saw the evidence until January 2013, when everything that had been discovered was revealed to them. Justin's 1996 Ford Explorer had a child seat in the back, where Isla's blood was found on the left shoulder strap. Dried vomit was also found in the back seat. In the girl's bedroom, police discovered blood on her princess pink sneakers, which were on the floor next to her crib, as well as on the face and arms of her doll. They believe she may have tried to clean the blood from her mouth with her toy. A blood stain was also found on the living room sofa. Most of the blood was found in a basement, where a pool of Isla's blood was found in the middle of the mattress Justin shared with Courtney. In addition, vomit and a pink strand that looked like the hair of a toy were found on the bed. Justin's sneakers, which had Isla's blood on the tongue and inside, were found next to the bed. There were also blood stains on the cement floor around the bed and on the walls, which corresponded to Isla's height. An expert determined that some of the blood drops were the size of a dime, indicating blunt force trauma. Furthermore, experts pointed out that some of the blood spatter in the house could have been caused by Isla's coughing, suggesting that she had suffered both internal and external injuries. Police said that they had used bed sheets to clean up Isla's blood. This was a horrifying revelation for Trista and her family, and they still had many more disturbing details to learn. Luminol tests conducted in the house revealed traces of blood that were not visible to the naked eye. The photo slides from the house left Trista deeply distressed. She panicked and left the police station, now more convinced than ever that her daughter, Isla, had been murdered. The police wanted to show her more photos, but she refused, saying she had seen enough. Months earlier, when the police presented the same photographic evidence, he showed no reaction. The police also tried to show Justin's family the photos. They refused. They were not interested. Justin's girlfriend, Courtney, who was with him the night Isla disappeared, reacted in a similar way. Overwhelmed and helpless, Trista told the press that Justin, Alicia, and Courtney were still walking down the street as if nothing had happened. 8 months after receiving a critical report in September 2013, Trista decided to write a letter to the press about the evidence and photos she had seen. She was frustrated by the slow progress and wanted to rekindle public interest in the case. In the spring of 2016, a group of journalists went to Justin's mother's house. His younger sister, Alicia, answered the door and was asked about the journalist who asked about the blood evidence. She mentioned that Isla was lactose intolerant and had been throwing up. However, a quick online search revealed that common symptoms of lactose intolerance include gas, bloating, abdominal pain, and diarrhea. While nausea and vomiting can occur, they are not the most typical symptoms, let alone vomiting blood. In 2017, at Trista's request, a judge officially declared Isla dead, determining that her death occurred on or about December 17, 2011, when her father, Justin, reported her missing. With this declaration, Trista and her attorney filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Justin, claiming he caused Isla's death through intentional unlawful acts and caused her pain and suffering before her death, including fear, terror, and physical injury. At the time of the lawsuit, Isla was still missing, and Justin, along with his attorney, denied any wrongdoing, describing the lawsuit as baseless. In response, Trista held a press conference where she addressed Justin directly, questioning whether he had a conscience. She said, "I could see it in your eyes, and you knew it was a problem. You looked at me, and I knew you cared." In early 2023, a judge granted Trista's request to add his mother, Phoebe, and his sister, Alicia, to the wrongful death lawsuit. The three defendants are now facing civil charges of wrongful death, intentional infliction of pain and suffering, and unlawful interference with the body of a deceased person. Additionally, Justin faces charges of failing to fulfill his parental duty of care to a minor child. Trista and her attorney understand that they will not receive any financial compensation from Justin. That is not the purpose of the lawsuit. Their purpose is to learn the truth behind Isla's disappearance. There are many strange things about Isla's disappearance. The police informed Trista of a shocking detail. On the morning Isla went missing, Justin drove to Portland and back before calling 911. He claimed that he thought Trista had kidnapped Isla and was looking for Trista, but he never contacted her or any of her family members. Instead, during that long drive, he called a friend who had sold him a $25,000 life insurance policy on Isla just weeks earlier. Adding to the strangeness, Justin stayed at this friend's house while the police were investigating the case. This was surprising, especially since he had been absent from his daughter's life for 9 months of Trista's pregnancy and for most of Isla's life. Trista also shared that she had received strange text messages from Justin in the week after Isla went missing. He expressed fears that someone might try to kidnap Isla. The last time he mentioned someone trying to kidnap her was on December 11th, just 6 days before Isla was reported missing. After her disappearance, his messages became threatening and cryptic, leaving Trista wondering what he really meant. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Romina Celeste Núñez Rodriguez. Romina Celeste Núñez Rodriguez was born in the fall of 1990 in Oñan, the capital of Paraguay. She was the oldest of 2 daughters in a poor working-class family. When the girls were still young, their parents divorced. Their mother, Miriam Rodriguez, had to raise them alone. She worked multiple jobs because her ex-husband did not provide any financial support and showed no interest in their well-being. When Romina was still in school, she started working to support her mother and younger sister. At 17, she entered a romantic relationship with a boy named Christopher. He courted her sweetly, and they dreamed of a future together. However, their happiness ended when Romina discovered she was pregnant and told Christopher. He responded by giving her an ultimatum that she could either have an abortion or they would break up for good. Romina was deeply wounded by her lover's words, but after talking to her parents, who she had always been close to, she made the decision to keep the baby. Her greatest fear was that having an abortion at such a young age might prevent her from ever becoming a mother in the future. Therefore, she felt she had no other option. Christopher, true to his word, ended all communication with her and showed no interest in Romina or their child's well-being. At 18, Romina gave birth to a son named Lucas. The arrival of the baby only made their already difficult financial situation worse. Money was extremely tight, and now Romina had to support her grandson too. Feeling depressed about their circumstances, she wanted to improve things and help her family, but she struggled to find a well-paying job in Paraguay. She called her aunt, who lived in sunny Spain. Her aunt invited her to come stay, saying it would be easier for Romina to settle there and that Europe offered more opportunities than Latin America. Without thinking too much, Romina packed only the essentials and bought a plane ticket to Spain. She left her 2-year-old son in the care of her mother and sister, planning to bring him to her once she found a new home and a stable job. In late summer 2010, Romina flew to Madrid and then traveled to Alcobendas, a provincial town, where she stayed at her aunt's house. She quickly started searching for a job, and luck was on her side. She secured a position as an administrator at a hotel, earning a good salary. She sent some of her earnings back home and used the rest to rent her own apartment, so as not to impose on her generous relatives. Romina soon met a man named Javier, and they entered into a tumultuous relationship. Like her, Javier had immigrated to Europe seeking happiness and a better life. He was originally from El Salvador, worked in construction, and appeared to be a serious individual. However, when Romina became pregnant, Javier was once again unprepared for the responsibility of parenthood. Despite this, they attempted to live together for a time. Unfortunately, shortly after their son was born, they ultimately separated. Romina found herself in a challenging situation, stranded in a foreign country with a newborn and unsure of what to do next. For a time, she returned to her aunt's house, where she received support and assistance. When the boy was about 6 months old, Romina returned to work because she couldn't afford to stay home. A few months later, she faced another shock. She had been ignoring her poor health and weakness, thinking they were just due to stress and fatigue. However, when Romina finally visited the doctor, she received a cancer diagnosis. She underwent several rounds of chemotherapy, lost her hair, and lost a significant amount of weight, but ultimately triumphed over the disease. After her treatment, she quickly recovered, continued working, and used wigs to cover her hair loss. Romina believed that after enduring such difficult challenges, a period of happiness was on the horizon. She saved money and planned to take her eldest son, along with her mother and sister, on a trip to Spain. In the summer of 2017, Romina attended an event with friends where she met a man named Raul Diaz. He was attractive, impressive, had a stable job, and was financially secure. Raul was drawn to Romina's beauty and began asking mutual friends about her. Romina was equally interested in Raul, and when he invited her on a date, she happily accepted. Raul was nearly 15 years older than Romina and worked as a lead process engineer at a large energy company. He had been through 2 divorces and had 2 teenage daughters from previous relationships, but Romina was not bothered by the age gap. Similarly, she was also a single mother, raising sons from her own 2 past relationships. After just 1 date, they quickly realized they were in love and didn't want to be apart. Romina, filled with excitement, enthusiastically shared her happiness with friends. Her new partner showered her with small gifts and thoughtful surprises nearly every day, organized romantic outings, sent flowers with heartfelt messages, and offered her compliments. Romina felt she had finally found true love and a man who would accept her and her sons. However, she soon began to hear unsettling rumors about him. People claimed that he had been rude and even cruel to his former wives, which had led to the end of both his marriages. Despite this, Romina didn't want to believe the rumors, although she noticed that Raul had no contact with either his ex-wives or his daughters. Despite their significant age difference and the presence of children from previous relationships, the couple did not let these factors stand in their way. Just 6 months after they met, they chose to move in together in a luxurious villa on Lanzarote, one of the Canary Islands. To Romina, this place felt like paradise, but her happiness was short-lived. Raul, who initially seemed like the perfect partner, soon revealed a controlling side. At first, they lived with Romina's youngest son, and Raul made an effort to take care of the child. Romina even believed he would be a great father to her boys. Raul promised her a long and happy life together, assuring her that he would take care of her and the children. Romina, deeply in love, trusted his words and eagerly accepted his proposal to marry him. However, Raul insisted they needed time alone together to fully enjoy their relationship before the wedding. Raul not only wanted to take Romina's eldest child from Paraguay, but he also hoped to distance himself from her youngest son. Despite this, Romina trusted her partner and ignored warnings from her friends who noticed his odd behavior. In June 2018, Raul purchased tickets for Romina and her child to travel to Paraguay, along with a return ticket solely for Romina. When she returned home and shared details about her partner, her mother and sister became uneasy about Raul's intentions. They suspected he simply wanted to get rid of her children. Romina was hurt by their comments and ended up having a small argument with her family. A few days later, she flew back to Spain, promising to return for the boys in the fall. When Romina got back, she received a warm welcome, and for 2 months, she was happily alone with Raul. However, in August, just a few days before the wedding, Raul violently attacked Romina. This was a shocking experience for her, but he pleaded for her forgiveness on his knees, assuring her that it would never happen again, and she chose to believe him. Romina did not report the incident or tell anyone about it. On August 10th, she attended the wedding with makeup covering her bruises, unaware that the man she was marrying would soon take her life. 2 weeks after the wedding, the girl returned to Paraguay, not to pick up her sons as she had initially planned, but to visit her family. Her mother and sister were confused by the changes they noticed in her since they last saw each other. Romina appeared upset and disoriented. She walked with a noticeable limp and had bruises on her neck, which she tried to cover with a scarf. When asked about her condition, Romina either remained silent or claimed she had hurt herself accidentally. She stayed at home for nearly a month, which surprised her relatives since she had just gotten married. Romina explained that her husband had suggested she visit her children because she missed them. Miriam praised her son-in-law for being generous, but she still couldn't understand why her daughter seemed so unhappy. In mid-September, Romina secretly borrowed money from her relatives to buy a return ticket to Spain because her husband refused to pay for it. This should have been a clear sign that returning was not a good idea, yet Romina still hoped for a happy resolution to their marriage. On September 17th, at the airport, her mother, sister, and sons saw her for the last time. After returning to her husband, Romina's life began to feel like a nightmare. Raul, who was using illegal drugs, no longer hid his addiction from her. When under the influence, he became aggressive and emotionally abused Romina. Each time she tried to leave, he promised to change and insisted that it wouldn't happen again. After the beatings and threats, there were often brief periods when Romina's husband would become loving and caring again, showering her with gifts and planning romantic outings. However, these peaceful moments became shorter over time, and instances of violence occurred more frequently. Just before the new year, Romina confided in her best friend that she feared her husband and worried he might eventually kill her. On December 29th, Raul beat her so severely that she had to seek medical attention. The hospital staff noticed something was wrong and considered calling the police to report the incident. At that moment, Raul arrived and insisted that Romina had simply fallen and that there was no need to involve the authorities. Romina went along with his story, declined hospitalization, and returned home with him. On January 1, 2019, Miriam, Romina's mother, repeatedly tried to call her daughter, but Romina did not answer. Concerned, Miriam then called her son-in-law to check on Romina, but he also did not answer. After several days of no contact, Miriam sent Raul a message indicating she would go to the police for help. This prompted Raul to quickly return her call, explaining that he and Romina had a fight on December 31st, after which she left with her belongings. He reassured Miriam that Romina would be okay and would return home soon, as this had happened before. Miriam, however, doubted Raul's explanation and felt something was wrong with her daughter. She insisted that Raul report the situation to the police. Finally, on January 8, pressured by Romina's family, Raul reported her disappearance. This time, he altered his story slightly, claiming that after their quarrel, Romina had taken some money from him and suggested that she might have gone to Paraguay to see the children, which is why he was not too worried before he heard from Miriam. What was Raul hiding? His testimony was filled with confusion and contradictions, raising many questions and suspicions. As a result, law enforcement decided to investigate the couple's life. After speaking with friends and family, they discovered that the marriage was far from perfect. Romina had often complained to loved ones about her husband's abuse, though she never provided details. Others frequently noticed bruises and injuries on her body. The police decided to place Raul under covert surveillance, tapping his phone conversations. However, Raul seemed to sense that he was being monitored and acted very cautiously, avoiding any behavior that might raise suspicion. Despite this, the investigation continued, and it was soon revealed that Romina had visited the hospital on December 29 with signs of severe beating. Her husband almost forcibly took her from the hospital, preventing her from going to the police. A few months ago, Romina filed a report for domestic violence but retracted it the following day. A week later, Raul, having calmed down somewhat, made a phone call to a relative in the police and carelessly mentioned that his wife was no longer alive and that her body would never be found. This statement prompted police to arrest him as the primary suspect and interrogate him thoroughly. Raul claimed that on New Year's Eve, his wife had been drinking heavily and started to argue with him. She demanded that he bring their children to live with them. When he said he wasn't ready for that, she had a violent outburst, started fighting, and began throwing things at him. Raul stated that he left his house for a few hours until things calmed down. Upon returning, he discovered Romina in the bathtub, unresponsive. He suggested that she had suffocated due to excessive drinking but was worried he might be suspected of her death or accused of murder. To protect himself, Raul decided to erase all evidence and report her as missing. Everyone was shocked by his admission of how he disposed of her body. He claimed he burned Romina's body on a barbecue in the backyard. Living in a luxury complex with a spacious area, he thought the neighbors wouldn't notice what he was doing or smell the burning flesh. However, he underestimated the situation because the barbecue did not function like a crematorium, and her remains were not fully burned after several hours. He then removed the body from the fire, cut it into parts, and put the pieces into separate bags. A few days later, he rented a car to transport the dismembered body to a remote and desolate area of the island, where he discarded the bags into the sea from the cliffs. The police spent weeks searching the shoreline and surrounding areas based on Raul's statements about where he had thrown his wife's remains. Divers and many volunteers participated in the search for body fragments underwater, but none of their efforts produced any findings. Meanwhile, on January 16, Raul was officially charged with domestic violence and the murder of his wife. This development followed a detailed search of his home, which utilized specialized equipment and luminol. This search uncovered multiple traces of washed blood in different rooms. Investigators discovered that Raul had been ordering caustic soda online, a substance used for removing organic materials and paint. In one of the second-floor rooms, he had scrubbed a bloody stain on the floor so aggressively that he damaged it and then attempted to cover it up with paint. According to investigators, this is the room where Raul dismembered his wife's body. Additionally, a broken piece of Romina's fingernail was found on the floor, which had traces of blood and Raul's skin cells, suggesting that she may have been alive and fought back during the incident. Also in the bathroom, investigators discovered Romina's contact lens stuck to the wall, possibly from a strong impact to her face. Despite extensive searching, law enforcement could not find any other remains. Meanwhile, a tourist called to report a lung fragment he found on the beach. He was unsure if it was from a human or an animal, but knowing that authorities were looking for a body in the area, he reported his discovery. By the end of February, forensic analysis confirmed that the lung fragment belonged to Romina. Raul continued to claim his innocence despite the evidence and examination results. He maintained his original belief that the woman had drowned in a bathtub while heavily intoxicated, even though evidence suggested there had been a violent struggle. He also stated that he did not use any tools to dismember the body. Instead, he claimed to have tried to burn it completely on a barbecue, asserting that the remains fell apart due to the heat, and he then placed them in bags to dispose of. This account was false for several reasons. First, the body of the adult Romina could not have fit in the fixture in his yard. Second, bones cannot become so fragile from fire that they fall apart without tools. Additionally, separating the lung from the body would require opening the chest, which cannot be done with bare hands. The investigation could not determine exactly how Raul killed his wife, but the evidence of a struggle in their home suggested that he may have beaten her to death. It was clear that Raul dismembered her body in the same room where he later repainted the floor to hide the blood. Eventually, faced with overwhelming evidence, he admitted that he accidentally killed his wife during a fight, contradicting his earlier claim that he found her dead in the bathtub. Despite his claims that she was drunk and violent, the defendant was found guilty in June 2023. Romina's family felt the sentence was too lenient. He received a 12.5-year sentence for involuntary manslaughter, 2 years for confirmed domestic violence, and 1 year for causing serious bodily harm to Romina in December 2018 when she was hospitalized. He also received several months for bodily abuse. In total, the combined punishment was less than 16 years in prison. Raul is currently serving his sentence while simultaneously trying to appeal the court's decision. The story of Romina Celeste Núñez Rodriguez serves as a poignant reminder of the devastating consequences of domestic violence and the complex struggles faced by individuals seeking a better life. Despite her resilience and efforts to overcome adversity, Romina became a victim of a controlling and abusive relationship, ultimately leading to her untimely demise. The court's lenient verdict against her perpetrator reflects the ongoing challenges in addressing domestic violence, leaving her family and loved ones grappling with their loss and advocating for justice. As we reflect on Romina's case, it is crucial to continue raising awareness about the importance of supporting victims and holding abusers accountable to prevent such tragedies in the future. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Chloe and Aubrey Berry. Wack-BJ is a small coastal settlement in Canada with a population of under 20,000 people. It is an ideal place for starting a family with a united, quiet, safe, but still well-developed community. On December 25, 2017, the town was alive with the Christmas spirit. The windows of the apartments along the street sparkled with colorful lights, and homes were beautifully decorated. However, the festive atmosphere was disrupted by the flashing lights of police cars responding to a tragic incident. Sarah worked for the local ferry service, which connected the mainland with coastal areas and several nearby islands for communication and cargo deliveries. She studied at the University of Victoria and completed an internship for this position. Prior to this, she worked in the public relations group. She was active and energetic in everything she pursued, which brought her success. Her relationship with Andrew blossomed quickly after they met, and they soon took their relationship to the next level. They got married and started a family, welcoming their daughter Chloe in 2013. 2 years later, they gave birth to their second daughter, Aubrey. At the beginning of their relationship, the love of young couple Sarah and Andrew seemed sincere and sweet. However, the pressures of daily life began to take a toll on their bond. After the family has children, their relationship deteriorated significantly. To make matters worse, Sarah faced the heartbreak of losing her father in a car accident. All of these things caused Andrew's behavior to change a lot. He became anxious, prone to outbursts over minor issues, and often directed verbal insults at Sarah. It was clear that Sarah's father had previously helped control Andrew's temper, but now that support was gone. As a consequence, Andrew's aggressiveness increased. Initially, Sarah attempted to resolve conflicts and kept their issues private, hoping this tough time would pass. Unfortunately, matters only worsened. During a tense argument over custody of her two daughters, Aubrey and Chloe, Andrew made serious threats, claiming that he would harm the entire family if the situation did not change. Sarah was deeply troubled by these threats, and Andrew's anger became increasingly uncontrollable. Andrew's behavior became erratic and dangerous. When he got angry, he drove recklessly, creating hazardous situations on the road. At first, he tried not to act like that when his daughter was there, but he eventually lost control and engaged in these antics even with the daughter in the car. It is clear that this marriage was once a happy one, but now it has become seriously dangerous for Sarah and her daughter, who were growing up in a hostile and unsafe environment. Despite this, Sarah made efforts to maintain the marriage. Months went by until Sarah reached her breaking point. She decided to end the relationship and told Andrew directly that he needed to move out that day. Instead of leaving calmly, Andrew has sparked another debate, barging into his wife's bedroom and trying to strangle her. Sarah managed to escape, grabbed her phone, and called the police. Andrew continued his aggressive behavior until the police arrived, clearly displaying his violent nature. He was quickly arrested and taken to the police station. After this episode, Sarah obtained a restraining order, preventing Andrew from approaching her or their children. This brought a sense of relief to the family, as Andrew was now under control. He moved into his own apartment and lived alone, while Sarah took care of their two daughters. She worked hard and often worked overtime to earn money to raise her children. Meanwhile, her mother also helps take care of the children while she is at work. During this time, Sarah and Andrew finalized their divorce, and Sarah was awarded full custody of their children. Because of his aggressive behavior, Andrew lost his visitation rights and was ordered to pay alimony. For 3 months, Sarah focused entirely on her daughters, giving them her love and attention. However, everything shifted when Andrew returned, saying he missed his daughters and wanted to meet with them. Sarah refused his request, and he was unable to see the children. At that point, Andrew seemed to have changed. With the help of a lawyer and witness testimonies, he wanted to protest the court's decision to grant custody of the child. Amendments were made to the court order, allowing him to see his daughters on weekends. He was proud that he now had official permission to meet with them. Sarah was responsible for bringing the girls Aubrey and Chloe to meet their father, Andrew, and she made sure to supervise their visits. During these times, Andrew was able to connect well with his daughters. Unfortunately, this was just the start of a tragedy. A few years later, issues arose concerning alimony and the shared ownership of the house. The court ordered Andrew to pay a large amount in alimony. Meanwhile, there were ongoing discussions about how to divide the jointly owned house for the benefit of their children. Andrew, the young father, refused to contribute any money towards the house. Consequently, the court allowed Sarah to buy Andrew's share of the property, valued at $60,000, for only $20,000, after deducting the alimony debt. The agreement means that Sarah will have full ownership of the house and will no longer be able to claim maintenance payments. Sarah accepted these terms. However, Andrew opposed this arrangement and sought to contest the court's decision. During this time, he frequently took their daughters to spend time, as the court permitted him to do so without the presence of their mother or any guardianship authorities. Soon, Sarah began to notice increasingly concerning signs regarding her children. After Andrew returning them one day, she discovered a bruise-like mark on Aubrey's head. When she called Andrew, he explained that Aubrey had accidentally hit herself while playing. However, during a later conversation, Aubrey revealed that Andrew had attempted to touch her inappropriately. Andrew dismissed the accusation as absurd, but Sarah believed her daughter. Determined to protect her children, she contacted Child Protection Services. An investigation was launched, and during this time, Andrew's interactions with Chloe and Aubrey were closely monitored. Although Sarah and Aubrey expressed concerns, law enforcement and Child Protection Services found no evidence of any misconduct by Andrew, leading them to close the case. Andrew insisted that Aubrey's bruise was caused by her falling, which appeared plausible since he stated he had accidentally bumped into her during a game. Sarah argued that Andrew posed a danger to their daughters, Aubrey va Chloe. She noted that he had previously exhibited strange and suspicious behavior, and the daughters were often reluctant to spend time with him. In an effort to protect her children, Sarah attempted to restrict Andrew's visits. In late 2016, she once again questioned his ability to care for them after he left Aubrey alone in a stroller in a public area while he walked away. Furthermore, Sarah claimed that Andrew spoke badly about her in front of the children, which she thought was his way of trying to turn them against her. During the trial, Sarah and Andrew shared their accounts of the incident and presented their arguments. Ultimately, the situation remained unchanged. Aubrey va Chloe continued to live with Sarah, while Andrew was allowed to take them on holidays and weekends. The judge viewed Andrew as a caring father capable who could provide well for his daughters. The court concluded that Andrew's aggressive behavior was only temporary and linked to domestic issues, with no evidence of child abuse presented. Andrew was given another chance, and both he and Sarah received decisions that they must comply with so they can continue to communicate with 6-year-old daughter Chloe and 4-year-old daughter Aubrey. Chloe and Aubrey were bright, cheerful children with distinct personalities and interests. Chloe had just begun first grade at a local school, where she discovered her passion for horse riding, a skill her cousin had been teaching her since she was young. She also had a talent for art. Meanwhile, Aubrey was getting ready to start school. The sisters were full of energy and creativity, and they shared a close bond and a love for artistic activities. During the court hearings, the guardianship service assessed Sarah, the girl's mother, and found her to be an excellent parent. She worked hard to maintain a good relationship with her daughters, both during their time as a family and after the divorce. The judge required both Sarah and Andrew to complete special training courses, and Andrew was actively involved in the process. Unfortunately, this wasn't enough to prevent a tragic outcome. According to the custody agreement, Aubrey va Chloe were scheduled to spend Christmas 2017 with their father, Andrew. They celebrated Sarah's birthday on December 21st at morning with the children, and then Sarah took Chloe and Aubrey to Andrew's apartment on Beach Drive. Andrew lived just steps from the marina, in an upscale part of the city with a view of the Pacific coast. However, he is facing many great difficulties, including a financial crisis. He had quit his job, lost his main source of income, and developed a gambling addiction. As a result, he was unable to pay alimony or even provide basic necessities for himself and the children. From the beginning, Sarah believed it was a mistake to take Aubrey and Chloe to see Andrew. A court order obligated her to do so, and failing to comply could lead to serious repercussions for her. Sarah was especially hesitant to let Aubrey and Chloe spend the Christmas holidays with him, as she felt it was unfair, but she felt she had no alternative. Sarah asked Andrew to leave the children with her for her birthday, but he immediately threatened to sue, so she was forced to comply. As Sarah approached Andrew's apartment, her anxiety intensified. She noticed from a distance that the lights in the windows were off. For several weeks, Aubrey and Chloe had shared that during their visits with Andrew, they enjoyed using flashlights as if they were camping, which they found entertaining. Sarah was aware that Andrew had left his job in May and are having a lot of financial difficulties, which might explain why the electricity had been cut off. To avoid making the situation more tense and affect the children's vacation, she decided not to talk about the issue with Andrew and the children right away. However, she planned to address it later, as she was looking for ways to restrict Andrew meet to Aubrey and Chloe. When saying goodbye to Aubrey and Chloe, Sarah was understood that they would stay with Andrew until noon on December 25th, after which he was expected to return them. Upon returning home, Sarah noticed that Chloe had forgotten her favorite stuffed toy. She took the toy and brought it to Chloe. When she knocked on the window of Andrew's apartment, both Aubrey and Chloe appeared at the blinds in their holiday outfits, smiling and looking happy. This made Sarah feel a bit more at ease. She gave the daughters the toy and left, anticipating that she would see them again in a few days. On Christmas morning, Sarah woke up in a surprisingly quiet house and began her usual chores to pass the time until Aubrey and Chloe returned. During this time, she cleaned the house, decorated for the holiday, and placed presents under the tree, all in an effort to make the daughters happy. By 2 p.m., Sarah's parents arrived, but she was starting to worry because Aubrey and Chloe had not yet returned from Andrew's house. Andrew was supposed to return Aubrey and Chloe by noon, but Sarah had called and texted him several times without getting a response. She then tried to contact Andrew's sister, but she also ignored Sarah's calls and messages. Growing more worried, Sarah decided to go look for the children with her mother, leaving her father at home in case Andrew arrived with the daughters. When Sarah and her mother arrived at Andrew's apartment, Aubrey and Chloe were no longer at the window. Inside, the place felt eerily quiet and empty. Sarah couldn't see what was happening through the blinds. She knocked and shouted at the window, but there was no response, which only increased her fear. In desperation, they decided to speak with the neighbors. One neighbor mentioned that he had heard the children talking early in the morning and, closer to midday, he heard loud noises coming from the apartment. Initially, he thought nothing of it, but now it seemed suspicious. He also noted that he hadn't seen any strangers near the building. Alarmed, Sarah and her mother quickly contacted the police to report Aubrey and Chloe's disappearance. When the first police officer arrived at the scene, he attempted to contact Andrew, the apartment's owner, but received no answer, just as no one responded to Sarah's screams. The officer then tried to open the door and discovered it was not locked. Inside, the lights were off, and flipping the switch had no effect. It became clear that Andrew's electricity and water had been cut off due to unpaid utility bills, and he was facing eviction. Using a flashlight, the officer was met with a shocking sight that resembled a horror movie scene. Blood was splattered everywhere, including the ceiling, prompting him to immediately call for backup. The police officers cautiously, weapons drawn, aware that the killer responsible for the horrific massacre might still be inside. They followed a bloody footprint to the bathroom, where they discovered Andrew, who was naked and severely injured with multiple wounds to his chest. He was still breathing, but each breath seemed increasingly difficult. In the next room, they found Chloe on the bed. She was already dead. Her body showed numerous cuts and bruises, indicating she had been beaten with a blunt object. Nearby, a bloody baseball bat lay on the floor among her clothes. Aubrey was found in a similar state as Chloe, dressed in blood-soaked pajamas, with splatters even on the ceiling. Both children Aubrey Va Chloe had suffered multiple lacerations and stab wounds, similar to those found on their father, Andrew. The police checked Aubrey Va Chloe's pulses several times, but they were confirmed dead. An ambulance quickly arrived to assist Andrew. Due to the cramped space in the bathroom, he was placed on a stretcher and prepared to be carried out of the apartment. At that moment, he regained consciousness, looked at the medics, and simply asked them to end his life. Andrew was taken to hospital with other police officers, and they hoped to question him once his health has stabilized. Meanwhile, they informed Sarah that both of her daughters, Aubrey Va Chloe, were dead. Overcome with grief, she screamed hysterically and desperately tried to enter the apartment. Sarah had many questions, and so did the investigators, about the brutal murders of her two young children on Christmas Day. She believed she knew the answer: their father had killed them. Given the severity of the injuries, Andrew quickly became the primary suspect. Sarah warned that he was a danger to himself and Aubrey Va Chloe due to the nature of the wounds. The police thought he might be more willing to talk while in the hospital, as they often obtain truthful confessions in such situations. Therefore, they wanted to interview Andrew to uncover what had happened to the children and to him. The police suspected Andrew had harmed Aubrey Va Chloe, defenseless children, and after realizing the gravity of his actions, he might have attempted to end his life. Aubrey Va Chloe's bodies were so severely damaged that the expert believed he first killed Chloe, then he killed Aubrey. Chloe suffered multiple severe head injuries from a baseball bat, which led to a fractured skull. Additionally, she had 26 stab wounds. Some of her wounds were inflicted before her death, while others occurred posthumously. The cause of death was identified as blood loss. Aubrey's situation was tragically severe. She had 32 stab wounds, leading to fatal blood loss. The medical examiner determined that the attacker had flipped the children over twice to stab them in both the front and back. He appeared to be enraged and intended to ensure that the girls would not survive Christmas. Meanwhile, forensic investigators thoroughly examined the apartment and discovered men's jeans and a blood-soaked t-shirt, both belonging to Andrew. A knife, clearly the murder weapon, was also located at the scene. The amount of blood in the apartment was so much that a team of experts was called in to assist in the investigation. Experts discovered many signs that there were efforts to clean up the scene, including fingerprints on the knife and patterned socks. Blood traces were even found in the refrigerator, indicating that the perpetrator had rummaged through it after the attack. In one of the rooms, a note addressed to his sister was found. In this note, Andrew expressed a long list of disappointments about his difficulties with Sarah, and felt misunderstood by the woman he loved deeply. He conveyed a sense of betrayal and recounted the many struggles he faced during his marriage and after his divorce. According to his confession, the only source of happiness in his life was his children, which led him to decide to end their lives together. It was clearly a suicide note. After investigating the crime scene, the police concluded that Andrew had attacked and brutally killed his children, Aubrey, 4 years old, and Chloe, 6 years old. Following the incident, he entered the bathroom and attempted to harm himself, believing these injuries would also result in his death. However, doctors assessed that none of his self-inflicted wounds were life-threatening, so he survived. Andrew soon regained his composure and was placed under medical supervision, where he admitted to self-harm. After receiving treatment, he was arrested and charged with double murder. When Andrew was taken to the police station, Sarah was already there with her parents. The police believed that Andrew had harmed the children, and he confessed to his actions, which caused Sarah to burst into tears. She had to be taken away from the station because she was inconsolable. It is hard to imagine her despair and grief, especially since she had tried desperately to protect her daughters from their father. Despite filing complaints with Child Protection Services and taking legal action, Sarah could not provide evidence to prove that Andrew was a danger, and her claims were not believed. Tragically, her daughters were killed by their father. The case received widespread attention and many people held memorial services to honor Aubrey and Chloe, innocent girls who suffered. The public was outraged by Andrew's actions and expressed support for Sarah. This incident sparked a worldwide reevaluation of the child protection system and raised questions about the judge who deemed Andrew a father thoughtful and loving to his children. The judge's decision granted Andrew unsupervised access to Aubrey and Chloe, which ultimately resulted in their deaths. However, no disciplinary actions were taken against the judge or the Child Protection Service. The victims of the tragic massacre, Aubrey and Chloe, were cremated. During the investigation, the complicated relationship between Andrew and Sarah came to light. Andrew is having a lot of trouble with his finances. He left his job in May 2017 and had already begun having trouble keeping up with his rent and utility bills, leading to his electricity being cut off. His financial problems were largely fueled by his gambling addiction. Although Andrew earned a decent wage of around $200 per shift, but during this time, he became addicted to playing cards. He attempted to recover his losses, but things only worsened. He started borrowing money from anyone who would lend it to him. His gambling addiction spiraled out of control, with his gambling expenses reaching about $3,000 each month. In the fall of 2015, Andrew won a big amount of $100,000, but feeling overconfident, he quickly lost it all. In an attempt to win back his losses, he borrowed $10,000 from a man named Paul. Desperate to repay this loan, he continued to take out additional loans, while losing interest in his job, eventually quitting. By spring 2017, he was in deep financial trouble, owing approximately $225,000, with all his credit limits maxed out. Andrew was in a desperate situation, even thinking about withdrawing his savings from a pension fund. He couldn't afford to buy food and had to ask his neighbors for help to feed his daughters during their visit. His life was filled with ongoing tragedy. During the investigation, police found disturbing search queries in his internet history. About a month before the double murder, he had been searching for ways to end his own life. His problems grew worse, and on Christmas Day, he made a tragic decision. He used a brutal method to kill his daughters, doing this act coldly and mercilessly, which makes people doubt his love for them. On January 16th, the hearings for the double murder case began. The prosecutor presented detailed information to the jury about Andrew's relationship and life circumstances just before the crime occurred. The prosecution argued that Andrew willingly put himself in this situation because he could not overcome his gambling addiction. They described his actions as premeditated, using evidence like his internet browsing history to support their argument. In contrast, the defense attorney highlighted flaws in the investigation, pointing out that a patrolman had left the scene while waiting for backup, which left the situation inside unclear. The lawyer argued that Andrew and his children were victims of a killer seeking revenge for Andrew's debts after the officer had left the scene. This allowed the real perpetrator to escape through the fire exit. However, the prosecution rejected these things because the scene was under constant surveillance. There were no signs of a break-in, and the attacker could not have quietly exited the scene without being seen by the police officer. Furthermore, statement of the defense contradicted Andrew's confession made at the hospital. During his hospital stay, he even asked the medical staff to help him die, indicating that he had inflicted injuries on himself and wanted to end his life. It is clear from Andrew's suicide note that he intended to end his life and harm the daughters so that they would be with him in death. However, the lawyer maintained that the family could have been victims of a stranger, a killer who unexpectedly found Andrew and the children in the apartment. Alternatively, they could have all been random victims of a maniac. On April 25, 2017, a woman was attacked and stabbed near Andrew's house, but the police could not identify her attacker. The defense suggested that the same person could be responsible for both this attack and the murder of Andrew's children, who remains at large. However, the details of the wounds and the circumstances of each incident were different, indicating Andrew's guilt. During the presentation of the crime scene and evidence related to the murders of Aubrey and Chloe, Andrew started to cry. The prosecutor asserted that their father, Andrew, was responsible for the murders. One key piece of evidence was blood on the floor that matched Andrew's. If the attacker had been a stranger, they would probably have worn shoes typically found in a home. However, the shoes Andrew was wearing when he was arrested matched those discovered at the crime scene. Also, the forensic expert pointed out that the injuries on Andrew and the daughters were the same. Andrew acknowledged that he had inflicted wounds on himself, and similar cuts were found on the children, indicating that the same person used the same weapon. At trial, the defense attorney argued that Sarah had put pressure on Andrew, leading to the possibility of him acting aggressively. They believe Sarah is the main cause of Andrew's unstable mental health. In response, Sarah countered these claims, saying that Andrew had been aggressive for a long time, which led to their divorce. She was only trying to protect her children from a dangerous and unpredictable situation, which is why she filed complaints with various authorities, all of which were ignored. Sarah was concerned about the safety of her daughters during visits. Recently, Andrew appeared to have changed for the better, but no one realized this was just his cover. The defense continued to argue for Andrew's innocence, portraying him as a victim of his circumstances. They mentioned that Andrew owed $200,000 to another man. Andrew claimed he couldn't pay his debts, which led to him being forced to keep a suspicious bag in his apartment, the contents of which he was unaware of. Various individuals resembling criminals would periodically come to collect it, and Andrew had given them a spare key. According to the lawyers, one of these individuals committed a violent act in the apartment. The prosecution questioned Andrew about why the attacker would kill Aubrey and Chloe in his apartment while he was there. Andrew claimed that he lost consciousness after being struck, and when he regained it, he found Aubrey and Chloe unresponsive. The attacker was still in the apartment, but due to the darkness, Andrew couldn't see his face clearly. However, he noted that the assailant was a dark-skinned man with dark hair. The attacker then ran into the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and tug of war, during which Andrew was struck multiple times and lost consciousness again. A mysterious bag was discovered during the investigation, but no evidence of any intruder was found, including DNA or fingerprints. The prosecution argued that Andrew's primary motive for the murders was financial distress. He was struggling to cope with life, unable to pay his debts or child support, leading him to consider killing his children to escape these obligations. The jury deliberated for 3 days and ultimately found Andrew guilty of double second-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison, eligible for parole in 22 years. Andrew showed no emotion when the verdict was announced, shocking Sarah's family because the sentence was too light. They also found themselves unable to contest the verdict. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Rita Polite. On December 4, 1998, Michael Polite was at home in the small town of Hopewell, Missouri, United States. At the time, his mother, Rita, was working at a local bar. While she was working her shift, Michael was home alone. Feeling bored, he decided to ride his bike to the nearest store, a supermarket where he often met his friends. When he got there, he ran into his 15-year-old friend, Josh Sansu. Michael invited Josh over and Josh agreed, and Josh spent the night at Michael's house. They passed the time playing chess and video games while they waited. When Michael's mother came home from work, he saw the headlights flashing on the sunroof and realized she was home. After Rita got home, she told the children to go to bed. Michael then woke up near dawn. In his room, he was lying in bed and noticed a strange smoke coming from the crack in the door. Josh, who was sleeping on the floor near Michael's bed, suddenly woke up and looked at him in fear. Michael started calling for his mother, but there was no response. Tensions escalated, and the children began to panic. When they left Michael's room to go to their mother's room, they witnessed a horrifying scene. Josh and Michael saw Rita's legs covered in blood. Their mother's upper body was on fire. Rita was engulfed in flames up to her waist. Without hesitation, Michael ran to get water to put out the fire, calling out to her in the hope that she would answer, but it was too late. Meanwhile, Josh ran to a neighbor's house for help because they did not have a cell phone. By 6:30 a.m., emergency services arrived and firefighters began to put out the fire. After extinguishing the fire, Michael called his sister, Crystal, to share the heartbreaking news. When police arrived at the scene, they found a young man sitting on his bed, in a state of shock. He was unable to stand up and struggled to speak clearly. The horrific sight and smell of burning flesh haunted him forever. Police quickly began an investigation. It was clear that the victim had suffered a traumatic brain injury. She had been struck in the head with a blunt object before being set on fire. The fire chief examined both the body and the crime scene. He quickly determined that gasoline or fuel had been used to start the fire. Forensic experts thoroughly examined the scene but found no murder weapon. Police quickly suspected the son of killing his mother. Rita's death was motivated by cruelty and hatred towards her. Rita was only 40 years old at the time. In addition to Michael, she had two adult daughters, Crystal and Melanie, both in their early 20s. Rita's family lived in Hopewell, Missouri, a town where residents felt safe enough to leave their homes and cars unattended. It seemed like a peaceful haven, untouched by the violence of the outside world. Sadly, even in such places, terrible crimes can still happen. The town had a friendly atmosphere and the crime rate was so low that most locals often left their doors open at night. Michael's mother, Rita, left the door open without considering the potential danger, which may explain why there was no forced entry. The police's attention was now focused on Rita's son, Michael. Michael's parents, Edward and Rita, met when they were young and eventually married. Their first children were twins named Crystal and Melanie. The girls had vivid memories of their father's cruelty. Although Rita loved Edward very much, he often cheated on her and eventually became abusive, both emotionally and physically. Unable to bear this treatment any longer, Rita decided to get the police involved. The children often witnessed their father's violent outbursts, which later led to behavioral problems, especially in Michael. About a year before the massacre, the family dynamics worsened significantly. During this time, Michael witnessed Edward physically attack Rita. He knocked her to the ground with several blows and began to strangle her. Michael and his sisters were terrified for their mother's life. Fortunately, the children managed to distract Edward, allowing Rita to escape from his grip. Following this incident, the family faced many challenges. In the summer of 1998, after over 20 years of marriage, Rita filed for divorce. Edward sought joint custody of their children, but the kids did not want to live with him. Rita chose not to escalate the situation. When filing for divorce, she cited her husband's infidelity but did not mention the years of abuse she endured. As a result, the court awarded shared custody, forcing the children to visit their father, whom they despised. Michael and Josh were taken to the sheriff's office. Although the teens were clearly not ready to talk, the police began an immediate investigation. On the way to the police station, the patrol car driver noticed Michael making strange comments and showing little emotion. Although the body had not been identified, Michael insisted that it was his mother, since there was no one else in the house. The police, ignoring the possibility that Michael might be in shock and not fully comprehending what he was saying, became increasingly suspicious of his involvement in the incident. At the police station, Michael underwent a voice stress test, which is also known as voice stress analysis. After the test, the officers informed him that he had failed, but this could be attributed to the trauma he experienced after witnessing his mother's death. Furthermore, voice stress tests are controversial and their results are often considered unreliable, usually not accepted as evidence in court. The police also took Michael's shoes, and specially trained dogs detected traces of flammable substances on them, suggesting they were used to ignite Rita's body after the murder. The Michael seemed to be attempting to hide his actions. Michael and Josh both claimed they had no idea what had happened. They were questioned without a lawyer present. According to the teenagers, they had been in Michael's room for some time, sleeping, and had not heard anything that had happened. Michael claimed that he had been in bed and had only come out when he smelled smoke. However, the police did not believe their testimony and the questioning became increasingly tense. Both boys remained in custody. Josh's mother went to the police station to support him as much as she could, while Michael's father chose not to support him and did not appear. On the second day, Josh made a statement on video camera in the presence of his mother and several police at once. He explained that he was not sure what had happened, but that he had woken up in the middle of the night just before the fire and found his friend Michael missing. He also admitted that he was fed up with the situation. The police took this as a contradiction to Michael's statement, which meant that Michael was lying. Josh's statement essentially confirmed the police's suspicions of Michael's involvement in his mother's murder. On December 7, 1998, Michael was arrested for the murder of his mother, shocking both him and everyone who knew him. Michael believed that it was a misunderstanding and was confident that he would be proven innocent and released. He maintained his innocence, but this did not convince the police. Michael insisted that he would never harm his mother, whom he loved dearly. Although they had had some recent conflicts, he hoped to gain support from his uncle and aunt, who lived nearby. His uncle, a politician, along with his sisters, sided with him, believing that he could not have harmed his mother. They believed that the investigation should focus on their father Edward. However, Edward was cleared of the crime because he had an alibi. Many people noticed problems in the relationship between Michael and his mother. The family struggled after the divorce. Financial difficulties affected both mother and children, and Michael, a schoolboy, faced challenges during this difficult transition. The police became suspicious because of Michael's behavior, which was hardly exemplary. In 7th grade, he began skipping school frequently. Teachers were concerned that he might not advance to the next grade due to his behavioral problems. About 10 months before the tragic events, Michael's behavior became significantly worse, and witnesses reported that he had threatened Rita. This led to Michael being taken to a psychiatric clinic. However, doctors found no underlying problems and attributed his behavior to puberty and the stress of his parents' divorce. Michael later admitted that threatening his mother was the biggest mistake of his life. Unfortunately, he could no longer apologize or take back his words. Many troubled teens act in similar ways, but not all of them go astray. Michael was not a criminal. He did not associate with bad influences or get into trouble that would make him a potential suspect. Although he denied any wrongdoing, the police were still fully convinced that he was guilty. Years passed as Michael waited for his Supreme Court hearing. During this time, he was in prison and was deemed extremely dangerous, so he was not eligible for bail. Just before the trial started, the prosecutor offered Michael a plea deal for manslaughter. If he accepted, he could face a maximum of 15 years in prison, but he turned it down. Michael maintained his innocence, stating he should not be punished for a crime committed by someone else. He believed the only person capable of harming his mother so brutally was his father, Edward, but no one paid attention to his claims. In January 2002, Michael, who had just turned 17, appeared in court. The prosecutor presented evidence gathered during the investigation, including shoes that had traces of flammable substances used to burn the body. Tests confirmed that gasoline was the substance used. The prosecution argued that the young man had a tendency towards arson. Multiple witnesses reported seeing him play with fire and intentionally destroying objects for entertainment. A friend of the defendant stated that a few hours before Rita returned from work, they had used gasoline to ignite some trash on the railroad tracks. Upon inspecting the crime scene, police found a canister with a small amount of flammable liquid left inside. The defendant's lawyer explained that although gasoline had splashed on Michael's shoes while they were playing with fire, this did not prove he was responsible for the fire in the house. The defendant did not kill his mother or set fire to her body. From the prosecutor, the jury heard about Michael's behavioral issues and possible mental health concerns. However, these were not confirmed during assessments. Before his mother, Rita, died, the young man's threats to her were considered key evidence that he was involved in the murder. Michael's initial belief that he would not go to prison began to wane. The prosecution argued that Michael attempted to end his life about a month after the murder, citing guilt for harming a loved one. A fellow inmate claimed to have heard Michael confess, but he was never brought to the stand to testify. Michael's defense maintained his innocence, but as he down and regained his composure, the jury began to suspect that he was hiding something. A key piece of evidence for the prosecution was a video of Josh's testimony from 3 years ago. Interestingly, Josh himself was not invited to take part in the case proceedings. From the start, Michael's defense seemed uncertain. It appeared they either lacked important information about their client or didn't believe he was innocent. The defense focused on the absence of direct evidence from the prosecution, which was actually true. No murder weapon or significant evidence was discovered. Additionally, there were no bloodstains or other traces on the Michael's clothing that suggested an attack had occurred. There were also no injuries that indicated he had struggled with the victim. The prosecution's hearings for the case lasted 3 days, after which the jury deliberated on the verdict. Initially, they struggled to reach a decision because the case was highly controversial. Eventually, they agreed that Michael was guilty of second-degree murder. Since he refused to cooperate with the prosecution, he received the maximum sentence of life imprisonment. Michael was stunned by the verdict. He accused the court of wrongful conviction and viewed himself as a victim, but he was sent to prison in Missouri regardless. No one paid attention to his claims anymore. This high-profile case drew the interest of several human rights activists who believed in Michael's innocence. However, over time, their interest in the case waned. The state correctional system is known for its extreme cruelty. From the moment he was imprisoned, Michael encountered the harsh realities of local prisons, which are among the most dangerous in the United States. On his very first day, he had a fight with his cellmate, Rome, and was sexually assaulted by prison staff. He realized that to survive in this environment, he had to adapt quickly, otherwise, he might not make it to his appeal hearing. Desperate to live freely again, he was determined to navigate this difficult phase of his life. He maintained that his conviction was due to a mistake. Despite feeling out of place in prison, Michael chose to alter his behavior by becoming more aggressive and getting multiple tattoos, as this was viewed positively by other inmates. This was his way of protecting himself. He repeatedly reached out to his father for help, but Edward did not support him. After 10 years of imprisonment, Michael's situation began to improve. During this time, he contacted the human rights organization Innocence, which advocates for the rights of those wrongfully convicted. The young man's case quickly drew the interest of several lawyers who thoroughly reviewed the case materials. They identified clear flaws in the investigation and the prosecutor's office. Human rights activists believed that the Michael's inconsistent statements made after his mother's death were a result of his fragile mental state and the trauma he had endured. Furthermore, it was evident that he was still a minor at that time. Given that his mother's skull was severely damaged, it was unlikely that a 14-year-old boy had the physical capability to cause such an injury to an adult. It was also suspicious that Michael's friend Josh didn't hear any sounds of a fight, suggesting that it likely never happened. Rita lost consciousness after just one blow from someone much larger and older than a 14-year-old boy. Furthermore, the fire chief's belief that the body was burned with gasoline was questionable. By the time emergency services arrived, the fire had already been put out, and any fuel had been consumed. The prosecutor's case relied solely on the dog's reactions, which indicated the presence of something that could start a fire. However, it's clear that the dogs couldn't accurately identify what they detected. The defense attorneys sought to challenge the key piece of evidence against the teenager: traces of gasoline found on his shoes. They argued that the testing method used to examine the soles was based on chemical reagents, which they believed was not reliable enough. They claimed this method could misidentify traces of gasoline as coming from certain polymers used in shoe production. Eventually, even the state crime lab supported this argument, noting that solvents and adhesives used in Michael's sneakers had chemical compositions very similar to gasoline. However, this information was not commonly known in the 1990s. Additionally, there was a video recording of Josh's statements. He had multiple conversations with police officers both before and after his friend's conviction. He mentioned that when he was 15, he endured lengthy interrogations by police, which were very tiring. Josh clarified that waking up in the middle of the night did not necessarily mean that Michael was harming Rita at that time. It was possible that his friend simply went to the bathroom. Ultimately, Josh expressed uncertainty about whether he could have seen an empty bed in the dark, suggesting that Michael might have been lying underneath it. Josh initially maintained Michael's innocence. However, the police created a misleading story using conversations taken out of context. Recordings from the interrogation revealed that Josh believed Michael was guilty. Josh later recanted his initial statement, revealing that police had threatened him into a plea deal to avoid being incarcerated with Michael. As a result, Josh did not testify at trial. Instead, the prosecution presented a video and audio recording of his testimony that showed potential involvement, without bringing Josh to trial. Michael's attorneys argued that this was because Josh could have contradicted key evidence that the prosecution relied on. Had the defense attorney had the opportunity to speak to Josh, the outcome may have been different. Following the incident, the media focused on securing Michael's release from prison by gathering evidence that disproved the prosecution's allegations. Many people close to Rita believed that Michael's father, Edward, was the real killer. Edward had a strong motive for the crime. After their divorce, the court ordered him to pay a significant amount of alimony to his ex-wife, which severely affected his finances. Many people attested to Edward's poor character and the way he treated his wife. During the divorce proceedings, he openly threatened Rita, saying that she would not live long enough to receive alimony. However, when Edward Polite was questioned by police after the murder, he gave an alibi. He had been more than 100 kilometers away from his home during the time of the crime, and witnesses corroborated his testimony. Therefore, any suspicion against Edward was dismissed. From the beginning, Michael insisted that his father was the only one capable of planning Rita's murder, suspecting that Edward was working with others to commit the crime. This theory was further supported by his legal team. Attention turned to Edward's brother Johnny. Interviews were conducted with neighbors and Johnny's wife, who testified that he returned home around 6 a.m. on the day of the murder and then disappeared overnight without giving a clear reason for his absence. Neighbors also reported seeing his pickup truck near the Rita's home late that night. During the investigation, police discovered a crowbar among Johnny's belongings, which appeared to be the instrument used to inflict the fatal injuries on Rita. The crowbar was sent for examination and was tentatively identified as the murder weapon. Despite this evidence, the prosecution maintained that Michael was guilty. His attorneys filed an appeal. They brought all their supporting evidence to the appeal. Unfortunately, Missouri's judicial system is notoriously strict, making it difficult to overturn a verdict or reopen the case. From the start, the court imposed obstacles on Michael's legal team, leading to the dismissal of their appeal. As the legal battle continued, it seemed that Michael's lawyers were in trouble. Then, in 2021, something important happened. Missouri passed a new law that gave a second chance to juvenile offenders convicted of serious crimes. Michael and his legal team quickly seized this opportunity, which played a key role in their case. On April 22, 2022, Michael's two sisters, Melanie and Crystal, brought the entire family to the rehabilitation center to welcome their younger brother, who had been paroled after 23 years. At age 38, as he walked out of prison, Michael looked up at the sky and expressed gratitude to his mother, recognizing her unwavering support for keeping him hopeful during his difficult years in prison. After his release, Michael wanted to ride a bike, a favorite hobby from his life before prison. He moved in with his sister because he had nowhere else to go and hoped to forget the decades he spent surrounded by criminals. To help with this, he started removing the tattoos that reminded him of his time in prison. Eventually, he found work as a carpenter and reconnected with his old friend Josh, who sincerely apologized for his part in what happened. Michael understood and assured Josh that he held no grudge against him. Josh expressed regret for not sleeping on the sofa that night. He believed that if the attacker had come in through the front door and seen Josh on the sofa, things might have turned out differently. Despite the new law allowing for conditional early release, the prosecutor could still initiate a new trial at any time for those who had been released. However, Michael recognized that there were significant gaps in the police evidence against him. The case against him relied solely on circumstantial evidence, which could be challenged. These accusations had a serious impact on his reputation, but he remained hopeful that the court would reconsider the case, especially since the real killer was still at large. The lawyers proceeded with caution to avoid harming Michael or provoking Missouri's justice system. Eventually, the local sheriff acknowledged the need to reopen the investigation into Michael's mother's murder. This renewed focus required police to re-examine a large amount of evidence that had been neglected for over 20 years. One key piece of evidence, the Rita's car, was also available for analysis. The prosecutor's office collaborated with the defense team, marking a significant turning point for Michael. He had been imprisoned for a murder he did not commit since he was just 14 years old. After spending 23 years behind bars, which represented most of his life, he longed to return to a normal life and felt he was finally on that path. However, he still needed to clear his name completely. Additionally, Michael was determined to find his mother's real killer, convinced that his father was responsible for setting him up. This betrayal had devastated his life while his father continued to live freely. The investigation into the crime was still active, and despite the obstacles presented by the local justice system, many law enforcement officials, including the prosecutor, supported Michael. With their backing, he felt confident that the true criminal would eventually be brought to justice. The investigation is ongoing, and there are indications of progress. However, even if justice is served, it won't bring back the lost decades for Michael. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of David Nixon. David Nixon was a friendly, ambitious, and optimistic man living in Grapevine, Texas. He had a talent for selling and was involved in trade. David married Donna Lella in 1990. The following year, they welcomed their son. He then ventured into real estate, which proved to be a successful field for him. Over time, he became one of the top agents in the city, handling million-dollar transactions. David's marriage ended in 1995 when he began an affair with flight attendant Lisa Hill. After the divorce, he stayed on friendly terms with his first wife, mainly because of their shared son, Nicholas. David then married another woman, but that marriage lasted only 2 years. He didn't remain single for long. Before his divorce from Lisa was finalized, he met a 27-year-old woman who initially overlooked his advances. Eventually, they decided to move into David's house together, which could signify his third marriage. David was known to his relatives for his love of fine and luxurious things, often owning more than his income could afford. 11-year-old Nicholas admired his father, believing David to be a wonderful man who was always willing to help the family. David was at the peak of his life when he suddenly became the victim of a horrific massacre. On the evening of April 18, 2002, a passing motorist discovered a fire and reported it to the fire department. After extinguishing the fire, the firefighters discovered a human body. They quickly called the police. In the middle of the night, a police investigator arrived at the scene of a fire at David Nixon's home in Grand Prairie, Texas. David had recently moved to the area. As the officer stepped out of his car onto the front driveway, he was hit by the horrible smell of burning flesh. He found a body wrapped in a partially burned sheet. Further investigation revealed it was an electric blanket, along with a sturdy camping tarp and rope that held everything together. When police examined the body, they found it was too charred to tell whether it was a man or a woman. However, they were able to determine that the deceased had fair skin based on the remaining facial features. It took several hours to carefully remove the body from the scene of the fire. During their investigation, they discovered several fibrous materials that could have been used to start the fire. These materials were later identified as electric blankets. Unfortunately, they did not find any other significant evidence to identify the suspect. A forensic expert analyzed the case and concluded that the victim was a man in his 40s who was murdered by a single gunshot to the heart before a fire broke out. There were no signs of a struggle, suggesting that the victim was caught off guard, possibly while sleeping. The initial autopsy could not identify the victim, but police believed he was the homeowner. To confirm his identity, they needed dental records and documents, which ultimately revealed that he was David Nixon, a 40-year-old. The event was a devastating loss for the deceased's family, especially for his son Nicholas. On that day, Nicholas was supposed to call his father but couldn't reach him. The Nicholas sensed that something was wrong but had no idea that his father was already dead. From the beginning, police suspected that Tracy, David's third wife, might be the killer. Friends of the couple noted that while they generally got along, they also had serious arguments, often over finances and David's gambling debts. As Tracy's tumultuous relationship with David progressed, she discovered that he was wasting money on gambling. Their arguments became more heated in the early spring of 2002. After nearly 4 years together, they decided to separate. However, a serious tax lawsuit ensued. To protect his assets and avoid losing his home, David transferred ownership of the house to Tracy. When it came time to discuss separation, Tracy insisted on keeping David's luxurious home, which had a hidden terrace and a heated pool. David tried to negotiate with her to get his property back, but she refused to agree. In April, things escalated when David reported to the police that Tracy had changed the locks on his house without his permission. She took advantage of his absence while he was away for a work-related trip to a nearby city. That evening, the police intervened to help resolve the situation. She argued that she had invested her own money in renovating the house and wanted to keep it. However, she could not provide evidence of her financial investment, and they were unable to reach an agreement. Nearly 2 weeks later, David was found murdered. This raised suspicions, especially since he had no known conflicts with anyone else, making it plausible that Tracy may have been involved in his death to retain ownership of the house. That evening, upon hearing about David's ex-husband's death, Donna went to the police station. Donna reported that David had recently expressed concerns for his safety due to Tracy's erratic behavior. She also provided the police with David's will, which he had asked her to share, naming a potential culprit if anything ever happened to him. Despite this, David had never reported any domestic violence incidents to the police and often minimized his problems. Donna understood the risks David faced during their property division, as he consistently sought to resolve conflicts peacefully. However, it seemed that Tracy was provoking new conflicts. Donna called the police to her ex-husband's home when her son could not reach his father. Donna had previously contacted Tracy to find out what might have happened, but Tracy dismissed her concerns. Tracy said she had not been keeping tabs on David, whom she had broken up with, and suggested he might be drinking or gambling. The couple had been living together in a house in Grapevine that was the subject of a dispute. They had recently agreed that the man would be moving out to a new place in Grand Prairie just a few days before his death. Tracy later confessed that they had talked about the move, and David had asked her to rent a van to help with transporting their belongings. She did not leave him in a tough spot. Instead, she called a car service and rented a special cart to load items into the van. David packed his things and went to the new address, planning to return for the rest of his belongings. However, he never came back. The disagreements that occurred created a strong motive for the crime. From the beginning, the police were interested in Tracy. They considered her a prime suspect in the case. When the police informed Tracy of the news that David had been murdered, the police expected her to be distraught and in need of comfort after the loss of a loved one. However, her reaction was unexpected. She was indifferent, uncaring, and showed no signs of distress. From that moment on, the police began to confirm their suspicions. Tracy revealed that she and David had had a serious disagreement in the months before David's death. With tears in her eyes, she shared that just before these events, she had lost her child, which made the situation worse. Last fall, Tracy discovered she was pregnant, which coincided with the decline of their relationship. In addition, she was dealing with health issues that contributed to her emotional struggles. Realizing that it was not the right time to have a child, she chose to terminate the pregnancy. Despite her decision, she still held David responsible for the loss of the child. It's important that police found no evidence of Tracy's pregnancy, as there was no documentation to support her claims. Everything was based solely on her statements. During the first interrogation, police closely observed the Tracy, and afterward, every officer was convinced that she was not telling the truth. They noted that she gave evasive answers, appeared confused in her testimony, and her body language often suggested she was lying. The woman insisted that she was not involved in the murder and was unaware of the details surrounding it. Since Tracy refused to admit anything, the police had no evidence to confront her with. Tracy was later released from custody. Extensive searches were conducted at the scene of the massacre and in the sewer. However, much of the evidence was washed away by the fire department's efforts to extinguish the fire. Key clues included tire tracks that matched the tire tracks of the truck Tracy had rented for David's move. Small fibers of fabric similar to those used to wrap the body were also found in the sewer. It appeared that the killer had attempted to dump the body in the sewer but was unsuccessful. Although most witnesses described Tracy in a negative light, this information was not enough to make an arrest or charge. Police began reviewing surveillance camera footage near David's home. That same day, they captured footage of a young woman who closely resembled Tracy near a store not far from the residence. Although the footage was limited, it helped police reconstruct the events. After reviewing dozens of hours of video, they identified a distinctive yellow truck that had stopped near the murder scene. The tire tracks from the truck matched those found at the crime scene. They then followed the truck to a nearby driveway. Additionally, 3 days after David's murder, they spotted a white Lexus, similar to Tracy's, driving in the area. The same woman was recorded walking past the store entrance. She made a purchase and left, and store employees reported that she had purchased a large amount of cleaning products, which raised suspicion. Police recognized Tracy and began communicating with her more frequently. Despite this, she maintained that she had nothing to do with the murder and claimed that the recordings the police found were fabricated to frame her and speed up the case. Tracy gave an alibi, saying she was at her parents' house in Arlington during the time. However, police were unable to find any witnesses to confirm her whereabouts because her relatives were away. Needing more evidence to prosecute, police searched Tracy's home. They believed Tracy killed David while he was sleeping by shooting him in the heart. Forensic experts believe David may not have had time to react while he was asleep. After David's death, Tracy immediately purchased a new mattress. A shopping list from a hardware store indicated that Tracy may have been involved in the events surrounding David's death. Donna believed that the only motive for the murder was the house itself. Tracy argued that David's death would not have benefited her financially and that she deserved to inherit his house. She claimed that there was no insurance policy in David's name that would have made her the beneficiary. Since they were not legally married, she could not claim any other assets. The motive for the crime is believed to have been both money and revenge for the breakdown of her relationship. After the murder, Tracy is said to have used a yellow styrofoam truck to transport David's body. It is suspected that she planned this from the beginning to divert the investigation. Using the truck, she moved the body by loading it onto a trolley secured with straps. Tracy then took the body to the construction site of a new home. Evidence, including fabric fibers, suggests that she attempted to dispose of David's body by throwing it into the sewer at the construction site, but was unsuccessful. She left the body on the ground and returned 2 days later to carry out her plan. During this time, she was recorded on surveillance cameras several times. She then planned to dispose of the body by cremation. Tracy wanted David to be completely burned, so she wrapped his body in several layers of electric blankets. Unfortunately for her, a passerby discovered the fire and alerted the fire department. Had her plan succeeded and gone undetected, she could have disposed of the body by throwing it into a storm drain. However, fate intervened and she was unable to carry out her plan. The next day, after returning to the police station a second time, Tracy was arrested and charged with the murder of David Nixon. During a preliminary hearing, the judge granted her bail but required her to wear an electronic monitoring device until the murder trial began. Despite her guilt, Tracy had many supporters, including Roland Taylor. Roland, a local dentist and neighbor of the couple, was originally from the United Kingdom but had settled in Texas. He and Tracy had been friends for a long time. Although he had heard many accusations against her, he was convinced that Tracy was the opposite of what people claimed. He believed that David's gambling debts had created many enemies who might want to harm him. He had spent a large amount of money at the casino, which suggested that police should consider other suspects with stronger motives. After investigation, it was discovered that David had no debts. Although he occasionally borrowed money and lost money at the casino, he always paid back the money to his creditors. This made that theory absurd. Roland and Tracy then had a romantic relationship after she was released on bail, which led to their engagement. He was determined to fight for justice and freedom for the woman he loved. He helped her find a competent lawyer. And in 2005, Tracy hired a criminal defense attorney who, although experienced, had only handled 3 murder cases. However, he believed that the evidence against Tracy was completely circumstantial and believed that he could successfully secure her acquittal. The defense argued that she had been arrested within the first 36 hours of the investigation, too early to thoroughly consider all potential suspects and properly assess her possible involvement. Typically, an arrest would occur when there is clear evidence, such as a criminal caught in the act with a weapon. However, this was not her case. Investigations generally take longer to effectively identify and narrow down suspects. The defense viewed the police actions as an attempt to quickly close the case by blaming the first person they encountered. Additionally, he argued that the prosecutor's office lacked direct evidence linking her to the murder, as no DNA or fingerprints of Tracy were found in the house or truck, nor was the alleged murder weapon, a gun, discovered. The prosecution relied on the testimony of several individuals who believed Tracy was guilty from the start due to her conflict with David. Their relationship was tumultuous. Shortly before his death, David had filed a restraining order against Tracy and stopped contacting her, even though they lived in the same home. Family members noted that David had tried to distance himself from his ex-wife. The attorney learned that the police had video footage of Tracy's interrogation and requested a copy. After reviewing the material, the defense attorney became convinced that the police used deceptive tactics to pressure Tracy into providing answers. The defense argued that the Supreme Court had intentionally portrayed Tracy in a negative light from the start. One of the prosecution's key pieces of evidence was video footage of Tracy abandoning her white Lexus, moving into a rental truck, and purchasing cleaning supplies at a store near where the body was discovered. By contacting the store clerk and obtaining a receipt from the woman in the video, it was discovered that she had used a discount card. The card was registered to Tracy, saving her 19 cents on her purchase. Tracy claimed that she did not remember having the card and insisted that she would not have left such evidence behind if she were trying to move around the city undetected. Tracy believed that she had been set up. Police believed that the cleaning products found during the search of the house matched those from a local hardware store. The defense attorney has offered several theories to explain David Nixon's death. One theory is that he may have been the victim of a robbery, while another suggests that the attack may have been a targeted attack on a gambling broker over debt. The defense has also pointed to other potential suspects who seem more likely than Tracy. One of these suspects is Jerry, a longtime friend of David's. They had vacationed together at a lake house, and Jerry frequently visited their home, where he knew Tracy well. The woman suggested that Jerry may have borrowed money from David, which could have been a motive for the murder. The police decided to investigate Jerry, who quickly admitted that he understood Tracy's attempt to blame him. He was an easy target because he was a close friend of David's. Although he occasionally borrowed money from David, he denied any involvement in the case. According to Jerry, he sold his old car 2 months before the tragedy because he needed money. He asked David for a large sum of money, and David agreed to help him. However, after Christmas, Jerry paid David back all of the money. Jerry did mention that he and David had planned to have a drink that day. The last time he heard David's voice was early in the morning of the day David was murdered. On the morning of David's murder, Jerry and David spoke on the phone and made plans to meet. However, David never showed up and stopped answering his phone. It was only later that Jerry discovered what really happened. Jerry claimed that he had not seen David that day and that since there was no debt between them, he had no reason to commit the crime. When this lead failed, Tracy pointed to another potential suspect, David's first wife, Donna. Just 2 months before his death, David had purchased a $500,000 life insurance policy in New Mexico, naming their son as the primary beneficiary and Donna as the secondary beneficiary. Since the boy was too young at the time, Donna received the payout after David died. Tracy was not named on these policies, leading her to believe that Donna would benefit from David's death. After David's death, Donna received a small sum of about $10,000, which would help her support her son. She found it absurd to think that the money was a motive for the murder, noting that David would have paid her more in child support while he was alive. Meanwhile, Nicholas's son insisted that only Tracy could have harmed his father, as he had witnessed their violent arguments. Tracy's attorney argued that the prosecutor's office lacked solid evidence against her and that police had not thoroughly investigated other potential suspects since David's murder. Tracy and her attorney eventually went to trial, confident of their chances of winning because they had dismissed the prosecutor's allegations. However, the prosecution was convinced of Tracy's guilt, describing her as an unstable and aggressive. The motive behind the case centers on a house, which poses a serious threat because the David may contest the re-registration of the property in Tracy's name and reclaim it. The attorney repeatedly argued that the charges lacked forensic evidence. There were no witnesses and the murder weapon had not yet been found. The defense believed that the available evidence would not be sufficient to support the charges. Tracy believed that the case was a carefully orchestrated plot, asserting that she had been wrongly accused. She felt that the police had not investigated the case thoroughly. The prosecutor had important information from Nicholas, the David's son. Nicholas claimed that his father had kept the same pistol in a safe in the bedroom of the home David shared with Tracy. However, police were unable to find the weapon for ballistics testing. Nicholas believed that Tracy had opened the safe, used the gun, and then discarded it. Tracy, on the other hand, claimed that David had never kept a pistol in the home and that she had never seen one. However, she could not explain why she had purchased a new mattress so soon after David's death. It appeared that the old mattress had blood on it and had become a crime scene. The prosecution said that the store staff recognized Tracy and confirmed that she had purchased a large quantity of cleaning products that could be used to remove blood. They advised Tracy to use hydrochloric acid, but it was not available in stores, so they suggested she order it online. She also purchased other items, all of which were later found in Tracy's home during a search. The prosecutor's office believed that the evidence allowed them to piece together the events of the case. The defense attempted to suggest that Donna could be the likely killer due to her strong motive. However, Nicholas's mother only received $10,000, which was insufficient to consider a violent act. They also tried to implicate David's second wife, Lisa, in the murder. Police conducted a thorough analysis of potential involvement by Donna and Lisa, examining cell phone records and geolocation data. Ultimately, they found no connection to the crime. Additionally, both Donna and Lisa had a positive relationship with David, which was confirmed by numerous witnesses. They also had credible alibis, and Lisa had no motive whatsoever. By the end of the trial, Tracy's confidence had plummeted. She expressed her frustration by saying, "I don't believe in justice anymore. I don't know how I'm going to feel after this." The trial lasted 2 weeks, and the jury found Tracy guilty of murdering David Nixon. They reached a verdict in less than 4 hours, resulting in her being sentenced to 40 years in prison. The victim's family was completely satisfied with the outcome, and many felt relieved. Roland Taylor stayed loyal to his fiancée, insisting on her innocence and visiting her in prison. With his support, Tracy filed an appeal, but it was ultimately denied. She will be eligible for parole in 2024 when she turns 55. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Alexis Rasmussen. Alexis Rasmussen was born in 1995 and grew up in North Ogden, Utah, a small town known for its quiet and not far from Salt Lake City. She loved dancing, reading, and spending time with her family, especially with her brother, who was her best friend. They enjoyed watching movies and chatting together for hours. Alexis was cheerful, sociable, and always smiling. She wanted to be independent and earn her own money for personal expenses. Like many teens, she decided to work as a nanny to earn some extra cash. In the spring of 2011, Alexis started searching for a part-time nanny job. She learned of a couple nearby looking for childcare help. She applied and was hired immediately after the interview. The couple, Dea and Eric Millerberg, were 38 and 36 years old, respectively. They were seen as decent and educated, attending church every Sunday. DEA worked at the hospital, and they had 2 daughters. Alexis's meeting with them went well, and they quickly built a good rapport. She started working almost daily, caring for their children while they was at work. The eldest daughter, from DEA's previous marriage, was 5 years old, and the youngest was just 9 months old. Everyone was happy. Alexis had pocket money, which she spent as she wished and even managed to save some. Eric and DEA were finally able to go to work normally and spend time together, appreciating that their children were always supervised by a young nanny. Meanwhile, Alexis's parents were pleased that their daughter was earning her own money and showing a desire to work, rather than spending time at questionable parties. Many of her friends also worked as nannies or waitresses, so this was considered normal. This thing was ideal for everyone until a tragedy occurred. On September 10, 2011, as usual, Alexis went to babysit the Millerberg family's 2 children during the day. She was supposed to return home in the evening. However, at 11:30 p.m., she called her mother, Dawn, saying that Eric and DEA had not returned from their date yet, and she would have to stay late. She asked if she could stay the night to avoid having to go home after dark. Her parents agreed, they trusting the Millerbergs as a decent family and they think nothing bad will happen. This was the last call her mother received from her daughter. In fact, Alexis' relationship with the Millerberg family was complicated. When she met they, she quickly fell under their negative influence. Despite their respectable appearance, but they had a troubled past. Both had been convicted for distributing illegal substances, and Eric had committed other crimes. At the time of these incidents, both were on probation for another offense, but neither Alexis nor her parents were aware of this, nor did they suspect she might be in danger at their house. The Millerbergs gradually got Alexis addicted to alcohol, starting with small amounts before hosting parties where alcohol was abundant. Later, they introduced her to weed. She quickly became dependent, and soon they began paying Alexis for her childcare work not with money but with weed. From the outside, no one noticed anything wrong with Alexis. She took very little and returned home late, so her parents were unaware of her new addictions and believed she was in good hands. Unfortunately, this was not the case. On September 11, 2011, Alexis' parents were waiting for their daughter to come home. However, after she informed them the previous day that she would stay at Millerberg's house overnight, she never returned home. Her parents tried calling her, but their calls went straight to voicemail. Too worried for her daughter, her mother, Dawn, contacted all of her friends, but none of them had any information. Dawn has also been in contact with the Millerberg family, who said that she had left their home that morning, and they never saw her again. Then, Dawn reported her disappearance to the police, who promptly began their investigation. Police have issued a missing persons notice for Alexis and questioned Eric and DEA, as they were the last known individuals to see Alexis. When the police arrived at the Millerberg home, Eric and DEA refused to let them inside, saying the house was untidy. They talked to the officers outside, stating that Alexis left their home around 11:30 a.m. to meet a friend, and afterward, the family went to bed and claimed to know nothing more about her whereabouts. During questioning, the officers noticed that DEA and Eric appeared to be under the influence of stimulants, which might have explained their erratic movements and overly cheerful speech. Their behavior seemed suspicious to the investigators, but without a search warrant, they were unable to inspect the house. This made them even more suspicious. The detective speculated about whom Alexis might have planned to meet. They were aware of her boyfriend and considered that she might have gone to see him. The police came to see her boyfriend, and he said they had no plans to meet that morning. To verify this, he showed his phone and his messages with Alexis. Upon inspection, it was clear they had only exchanged brief messages shortly before she stopped communicating. The boyfriend claimed he had no idea where she could have gone or whom she was with. Detectives also spoke with Alexis' other friends and classmates, but nobody had seen her since she disappeared. It seemed like she had vanished. They all mentioned that she had no enemies. She was an ordinary teenager, with no ties to the criminal world. The possibility of her running away was dismissed because all her belongings, including money she had saved, were left at home. She had never run away before and wasn't seen as a troubled teenager. All the leads turned out to be useless. At that time, Alexis' parents were unaware of an app called Blink, which could have helped them locate she. Blink allows real-time tracking of the movements of loved ones and friends who choose to share their location. The app is designed to be secure and does not allow tracking of strangers, which prevents stalking. To track someone, you must send a request from your contact list, and they must accept it. The last time Alexis's phone worked was at Eric's house, which was the last known location of she. There was no evidence that she had left the house Millersburg that morning. Investigators started looking into Eric and DEA more closely and discovered that they had a history of distributing illegal substances, and Eric has a lot of criminal records. During the investigation, police learned that Alexis's friends knew about the true nature of the relationship between Alexis and the Millersburg family. Alexis, along with several other teenagers, including friends who had also disappeared, looked after their children. The teenagers were pleased with these working conditions because it gave them access to alcohol and substances. Multiple witnesses confirmed that DEA sold prescription drugs to Alexis, for which she received about $100. Detectives continue to question Eric and DEA, informing that they knew about illegal drug activities. Then, Eric and DEA admitted to giving drugs to teenagers, but denied any involvement in Alexis's disappearance. Despite their denial, they were arrested for distributing illegal substances and violating probation terms. They faced up to 5 years in prison. The case was further complicated because they were supplying drugs to minors. The police also reached out to Eric and DEA's friends and acquaintances for information, but everyone refused to cooperate. By this time, detectives were convinced that Eric and DEA were responsible for Alexis's disappearance. Detectives have obtained a search warrant for the Millersburg family home and conducted a search. Although they didn't find anything suspicious, they did discover a large quantity of illegal substances. Their 2 children, the eldest daughter was placed with her biological father, while the youngest child went to a foster family. A month into the investigation, a confidential informant contacted the officers by phone. He revealed that on the night of the disappearance, Alexis stayed at the Millersburg family house. She didn't leave or meet anyone the next morning. That night, Eric offered her strong substances, and she agreed to try them. Afterward, she started acting crazy and not understanding what she was doing. Eric persuaded her to engage in intimate relations. During the incident, Eric and DEA noticed that the girl was extremely disoriented and had an unusually low body temperature. DEA, who had medical training, realized she needed urgent assistance. They carried her to the bathroom and placed her in hot water to warm her up. Then, she regained consciousness and seemed to improve. She asked to be left alone to relax. Eric and DEA left the house to smoke and think about their next steps, as they were very frightened by Alexis's condition. When they returned, they noticed she was still cold. They then took her out of the water, wrapped her in a warm blanket, and placed her on the bed. They went out again for another smoke break to discuss the situation. Upon returning, they found she unconscious, with a mucus-like substance coming from her mouth. DEA, being a nurse, attempted to resuscitate her using all her skills, but it was too late, she had already died. Eric and DEA were scared, as they were on conditional early release and were on house arrest, and they did not want to go back to prison. In their panic, they sought help from friends to dispose of the body. They needed a car, which they didn't have, but everyone refused to assist, not wanting to risk jail for aiding and abetting. Desperate, they contacted another friend to borrow a car. He agreed, and they placed Alexis's body in the trunk and drove to another county. There, in a remote forest area, they hid her body. The confidential informant, Smith, reported everything to the police. Initially unaware of what was going on, he lent his car and later helped Eric and DEA move the decomposing body to a remote location. During this time, he heard all the information he shared with the police. Feeling remorse for assisting he decided to disclose everything to the investigators, who needed this information. Thanks to his tip, the police discovered the body of Alexis on October 18, 2011, 38 days after she disappeared. The victim was found in a fetal position, with her legs pulled close to her body, partially concealed in a garbage bag. Due to the body's advanced decomposition, the police could not immediately identify her. The body was in a shallow grave. A detailed forensic examination was required to confirm her identity, determine the cause of death, and the circumstances surrounding the incident. The identity of the girl, Alexis Rasmussen, was confirmed through dental records and fingerprints, exactly as predicted. Autopsy results and post-mortem analysis showed that Alexis had 7 times the lethal dose of a potent toxin in her body, which may have been the cause of death. However, there were also signs of strangulation, blunt force trauma, and stab wounds on her body. Due to the body's poor condition and advanced decomposition, it was difficult to identify all the wounds accurately, making it impossible to determine the exact cause of death. As a result, an overdose was concluded as the cause of death, but it was clear that this was not an accident. The girl had been abused. Alexis' family requested privacy during the investigation because she was a minor. A memorial service was held in her hometown of Ogden, attended by many residents. The teenager was buried on October 29. Informant, Smith, was promised immunity from charges of complicity in exchange for his cooperation. His testimony was crucial in locating the body, gathering evidence, and bringing charges, so he appeared in court only as a witness. During the trial preparation, phone records from Eric's mobile phone were reviewed. On the night Alexis disappeared, he called his friend several times, asking for help to dispose of something. CCTV footage was also examined, revealing that on September 10, 2011, between 10 and 11 p.m., DEA visited the Wall Prince Pharmacy to buy prescription drugs that induce an altered state of consciousness. Police conducted a detailed search of the Millerbird family home using luminol and found tiny blood stains. It was clear they had tried to hide what had happened by thoroughly cleaning. However, luminol can detect blood stains even after cleaning agents are used, which the criminals apparently did not know. A section of the old carpet had been cut out and discarded, leading the police to believe it had blood on it that couldn't be cleaned off. The police were puzzled about the presence of blood in the house since, according to Smith, there shouldn't have been any after an overdose. This suggested that something more violent had occurred and that Alexis likely suffered violence. Detectives then obtained a search warrant for Smith's car, which had been used to transport she. However, the car had already been sold to another district, delaying its seizure. When the car was finally located and examined, it was found that the old trunk upholstery had been removed and discarded, but microscopic blood traces remained underneath. All DNA samples collected were tested and confirmed to belong to Alexis. Smith told detectives that the incident might have been a deliberate murder. Eric and DEA may have sought to eliminate Alexis to prevent her from reporting them to the police for drug distribution and harassment. The police supported this theory, as there were indications of a premeditated crime. Initially, Eric faced charges of child abuse and drug distribution, while DEA was only charged with forging a prescription for medical drugs. After new evidence surfaced, Eric was additionally charged with first-degree murder, attempting to obstruct justice, and engaging in sexual activities with a minor. A forensic examination later revealed that Alexis' body was abused post-mortem, which constituted a criminal offense under state law. Eric and DEA was decided to be tried separately, and DEA's trial began in April 2012. She was accused of illegally obtaining a prescription for illegal substances and obstructing justice. In 2015, she was sentenced to 7 years in prison. However, by then, she had already served 3 years during the trial. She was to be sent to prison to complete her sentence. She was extremely outraged by the jury's decision. Then, she gave a heartfelt speech, expressing regret for what happened, but she did not admit guilt or involvement in Alexis' death, claiming her husband, Barrick, was responsible. She offered excuses and also expressed her deepest condolences to the Alexis family. The court deemed imprisonment appropriate for Eric and DEA's actions, distributing substances to minors, engaging in sexual intercourse, and intentionally drugging a teenager with illegal substances. Additionally, they attempted to hide the body and mislead the investigation. Notably, the body was buried twice because Eric thought the first location was not secure enough. This indicated careful planning of the crimes. DEA stated that after 3 years in prison, she realized her mistakes and wanted to reintegrate into society. She requested freedom, but no one believed her intentions were genuine. Her actions were seen as an effort to avoid more jail time, so the commission decided she should remain imprisoned. DEA was sent back to jail to serve the rest of her sentence. However, she soon became eligible for parole. While in prison, her relationship with Eric fell apart. They argued, and DEA filed for divorce, which was finalized. During his imprisonment, Eric changed the tattoo on his neck from DEA's name to Death, which was in English. This change led to disciplinary action against him. In July 2013, Eric Millerbird's trial began. By March 2014, he pleaded not guilty to all charges. He claimed that the night Alexis disappeared, she stayed with them to babysit. After returning from a date, they used substances together at her request. They all attempted to engage in sexual activity. Regarding the drug use, Eric asserted that Alexis used the substances voluntarily. During the trial, Eric's criminal history was revealed. Between 1997 and 2011, he faced multiple charges, including burglary, firearm offenses, and resisting arrest. During the trial, the front rows of the courtroom were filled with Alexis' friends and acquaintances, all visibly grieving. This hearing was particularly challenging for them as it revealed sensitive details about the life of the underage girl for the first time. Previously, her relatives were unaware that she was paid in substances by her employers for her work as a nanny. These adults had gotten her addicted. However, Eric showed no remorse for exploiting the girl. He remained jailed during the trial for providing illegal substances to minors and harassing them. This situation likely led to conflicts for Eric in prison. He was attacked by his cellmate, Simon Russell, who stabbed him around 30 times, focusing on his head and neck. He also suffered multiple defensive wounds on his hands. He was then taken to the hospital, where his condition was deemed satisfactory after receiving first aid. He survived the attack. The day after, Simon was charged with attempted murder and obstruction of justice. Eric's provocative behavior was seen as outright disrespect both in jail and in the courtroom. He not only supplied Alexis, a 16-year-old girl, with marijuana but also repeatedly attempted to have sexual relations with her. On the night of the girl's death, he assaulted her even after she had died. Eric's wife, DEA, testified against him, accusing him of committing the crime. She stated that he forced Alexis to take 3 doses of drugs and then started to harass her. When Alexis became ill, they attempted to help her, but it was too late, and she died. Despite this, Eric still engaged in sexual intercourse with her after her death. The prosecution supported this account. The prosecutor argued that Eric behaved monstrously, exploiting Alexis's trust, coercing her into consuming hard drugs, and then assaulting her by stabbing and bludgeoning her. They claimed his sexual desire was the main motive for the murder. However, Eric's lawyer contended that DEA's testimony was false, accusing her of manipulating the situation to avoid punishment and by shifting blame onto her husband. Actually, the prosecution only presented communication records from Alexis' accounts, with no evidence from DEA that Eric had given her a lethal dosage of illegal drugs. The medical examiner's report stated that the official cause of death was an overdose, despite other injuries sustained. There was no definitive proof that Alexis didn't inject the drugs herself, only witness testimonies could clarify any involvement in her drug use. However, Eric and DEA blamed each other. The defense argued that DEA's involvement in the crime was greater than she admitted and that she was equally guilty. They alleged that she urged Eric to kill Alexis and dispose of the body. The lawyers claimed Alexis's death was accidental due to an overdose. Furthermore, the defense lawyers suggested that DEA should bear significant responsibility for the incident. The prosecution argued that Eric supplied Alexis with illegal substances to harm her. She deceased also had other injuries, including head trauma from a blunt object and some fresh wounds, indicating it wasn't an accident. According to the prosecution, it was clearly murder, with Eric directly responsible for her death. They demanded the harshest possible punishment for Eric, describing him as a manipulator who first got the girl addicted to mild illegal substances and then continued to administer them for his exploitation. The trial was highly controversial, with an uncertain outcome until sentencing. Eric advised his lawyers to agree to let him take some responsibility. He believed it was only fair to admit his role in what happened and apologize to Alexis' family, hoping to receive a lighter sentence. However, he denied committing deliberate murder. He claimed he did not inject she with psychoactive substances, attributing this action to DEA. Surveillance footage showed that DEA went to the pharmacy for prescription drugs and forged prescriptions. Despite this evidence, Alexis' relatives believed Eric was the main culprit and urged the judge to impose the maximum sentence. They wanted a life sentence without parole to ensure he would never be released. The court found him guilty of all charges, including first-degree murder, and sentenced him to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 6 years. DEA applied for parole 3 times. Her first applications in 2015 and 2017 were rejected. However, in 2018, her application was approved because she completed addiction recovery courses and a culinary business program to help her reintegrate into society. She was released on October 16, 2018. Eric became eligible for parole in 2018 and applied for release, but his request was denied, and he remains in prison. Alexis' family hopes he will never be released.